Kazuma is a shut-in gamer who dies a pathetic death and gets isekai'd into a fantasy world. However, when he tries to create a party of adventurers to defeat the Demon King, each one of them turns out to be a freaky weirdo, so he will drop the mission and clap them instead.
Would you please let me suck it out?
Absolutely.
It all starts when the sweaty gamer boy Kazuma decides to finally touch some grass and leave home in the middle of the night to get his hands on a limited edition of a game. 5 hours later, he gets off a bus, all happy because he got what he wanted. However, the sunlight sucks the life out of him, and as he begins walking home, he passes by a girl from his high school. Just then, he sees Truck Cunt about to send her to an isekai, but Kazuma jumps in to save her. However, he ends up getting yeeted to a different plane of existence, where a blue-haired chick named Aqua tells him that he's dead. He asks what happened to the girl he saved and is relieved to learn that she is totally fine. He's glad his life wasn't in vain, but Aqua tells her the girl would have been fine even if he didn't help her. Kazuma wonders how he died then, and Aqua tells him that he mistaked a tractor going at 5 miles per hour with the isekai maker dying of shock. She starts wheezing like a dying seal, saying she's seen clowns before, but he is a whole circus. She even mentions that Kazuma wet himself before dying, and when he was taken to the hospital, the nurses and doctors laughed as he died from a heart attack. When his family rushed to the hospital, they couldn't hold back their laughter. After teasing into her heart's content, she introduces herself as Goddess Aqua, responsible for guiding young humans to the afterlife. She gives him 2 options. He can either start from zero again, or he can go to heaven. Although heaven isn't the dreamy place people imagine it to be. She says there are no manga TV or games there, and the worst part is that he can't even get any shawties on his monster truck, which is not so different from his previous life. She advises him to take a new life, but since he likes games, she presents him with a world that has been threatened by the Devil King. The population is on a steady decline there, so Aqua offers to send him there with his memories intact. Kazuma argues what's the point of sending him there if he's going to get yeeted again, so Aqua decides to give him one thing of his choosing into this new world. It could be a powerful weapon or a special ability, which he can use to become a superhero of that world. She then gives him several things to pick from, but Kazuma can't seem to make a choice. While munching on his chips, she tells him to hurry because no one expects anything from a smelly Discord mod like him, which annoys Kazuma. To get back at her, Kazuma decides to pick her as the item he's supposed to take, and just then, a new goddess appears to replace her. Aqua tries to talk her way out of it, but the new goddess activates the spell and wishes her the best of luck. Aqua argues that she only has healing spells and has no experience in combat. But before she can process, Kazuma grins at her and tells her she deserves it because she made fun of him. Before they are teleported, the new goddess tells Kazuma that he will be granted one wish by the gods if he beats the Devil King, so he has something to look forward to. Soon after, they arrive in the bustling city of Axel, and Kazuma is excited because he can finally go on crazy adventures. Aqua, on the other hand, is bawling her eyes out because she is stuck with this otaku who hasn't showered in weeks. He then asks Aqua to get him a magical suit so he can get out of this Squid Game costume, but Aqua starts venting out her frustration by shaking him violently. Unsure of what to do, Kazuma decides to find the Adventurers Guild because that's the go-to place in most RPGs. On the way, he asks her if she knows where the guild is, but she says she's too cool to care. Eventually, they find the place and go inside, and are immediately called out by a bulky ruffian for wearing weird dresses, and the bulky guy guides him to the counter. Aqua asks how he managed to make a fake story on the go, and he tells her she would be able to do it too if she weren't useless and stupid. Aqua is impressed because she did not expect a shut-in loser to be smart, and asks if he's ever had a girlfriend before. However, he gets upset because he hasn't touched grass, let alone a woman in his life. At the counter, he learns from Luna that he needs to pay a registration fee to become a member of the guild, and since they are as broke as you guys, they have no choice but to wallow in their misery. Kazuma argues that games often start a player off with basic equipment and a bit of cash, but Aqua says he's useless, and she'll get them money on her own. Aqua spots a priest and immediately walks up to him, proudly declaring herself the goddess of the Axis Order and asking for a donation. However, the priest calmly informs her that he's actually part of the Eris Order, which follows her junior, the goddess Eris. However, since they're related, he decides to take pity on her and donate a few coins to help them enroll in the guild. They take the money to Luna, who then explains that adventurers can have their own occupations and shows them a registration card that keeps track of all the monsters they've slain. She then asks them to place their hands on a crystal, and as Kazuma does so, it starts evaluating his stats to show him the best possible occupation for him. After it's done, Luna checks his card and says that, while he's below average across all stats, his intelligence is decent and his luck is very high. However, she says such skills only suit a merchant, and Aqua sheepishly holds herself back from busting out a laugh. Despite the warning, Kazuma asks Luna to register him as an adventurer, and she tells him he can always change professions later on. When Aqua takes the test, Luna reveals her luck and intelligence are lower than a chimp's, but all the rest of her stats are really high. Luna is shocked and tells her that, other than the wizard class, Aqua can pick any other and excel at it. Aqua decides to pick a class that focuses on healing, and Luna registers her as an archpriest, who not only commands all healing but is strong enough to stand on the front line. Aqua then receives a warm welcome from everyone at the guild, and others start wondering if she will be the one to defeat the Devil King. From that day, their adventure starts, and Kazuma spends the next few days working really hard to make a living during the day and sleeping in a stable at night. Eventually, the two get accustomed to this new world and make friends, following the same routine day after day. However, one day Kazuma realizes that they've turned into day laborers, and Aqua seconds him because they came here to defeat the Devil King. Later, he reflects on how all the monsters near town were wiped out a while ago, so there are hardly any quests to do. That evening, Aqua suggests they go out of the city and do a quest, promising that they will be fine as long as she is around. With her status as a goddess, Kazuma agrees to go with her, and their adventure finally begins. The next day, Kazuma wakes up in a barn again and realizes his dream of living an adventurer's life isn't going as planned. Even job hunters in Japan had enough money to stay in hotels, but he's stuck in a world with a terrible minimum wage. When Aqua wakes up, he asks what happened to the plan of going on a quest, and Aqua says she wanted to sleep till late. Kazuma then argues that he expected this world to be at war, but it's all peaceful here, and Aqua explains it's because it's the furthest from the Devil King's castle. She then asks him to prepare for the quest. Later, Kazuma finds himself chased by a giant frog, while Aqua watches in amusement. Kazuma then explains how these giant toads show up to hunt cattle during their egg-laying season, and he's tasked with eliminating 5 of them in 3 days. Instead of helping, Aqua takes her sweet time poking fun at him and says she'll help him only if he worships her from now on. However, amid her yapping, the toad casually walks up to her and swallows her better than your mum swallows milk. Kazuma quickly runs towards the toad and manages to save her, and while she is covered in its saliva, she climbs onto Kazuma to thank him for saving her life. The guy then decides to head back since they're not cut out for this job. While he's lost in thought, Aqua spots another toad in the distance and rushes towards it to finish it off with his single powerful attack. However, the attack does 0 damage to the toad, and she gets swallowed once again, prompting Kazuma to jump to her rescue again.
Women.
That night in the barn, Aqua laments over their lack of strength and states they need to recruit more allies to their cause. He then seconds her idea of having allies, and Aqua believes will be eager to join her party since she's from an advanced class. However, despite posting a recruitment offer on the notice board, they are approached by absolutely no one. Turns out, Aqua made it a requirement that one has to be in an advanced class to join, and Kazuma believes that's way too strict. While they contemplate changing the terms, a mysterious person walks up to them and inquires about their poster. She then says their meeting was predetermined by fate and introduces herself as Megumin, an archwizard who controls explosions and offensive magic. She then starts boasting about her almighty powers, but Aqua and Kazuma are definitely not feeling it. Suddenly, she passes out and reveals she hasn't eaten anything in 3 days. Kazuma offers her food and also suggests she take off her eye patch because Aqua has the ability to heal. However, Megumin says it's a magical patch that suppresses her magical powers. However, Kazuma calls BS and forces it off her face, and while he's at it, Aqua explains that Megumin is a crimson demon with high intelligence and magical powers. Later, while she sleeps, Aqua and Kazuma inspect her adventurer card and confirm that she is indeed an archwizard with a really high magic stat. Later, they take her to the outskirts to find more toads, but Megumin tells them to keep the frogs busy because she needs time to prepare her spell. When another frog shows up, Kazuma asks Aqua to show her why she's a goddess, which makes Megumin think Aqua has a personality disorder. Aqua gets upset and rushes towards a toad to prove her worth, only to get swallowed once again. In the meantime, Megumin finally charges up a spell that covers the entire skyline and then creates a nuclear-level explosion that blows up the toad. Just then, another toad shows up, but Megumin collapses because she's used all her magical power in the previous attack. With only Kazuma left standing, the second toad slowly creeps in and swallows Megumin as well, and Kazuma uses plot armor to rescue both of them. With 5 toads defeated, their quest is complete, and the squad returns to the city covered in frog saliva. Kazuma then bans Megumin from using her explosion magic unless it's an emergency, but Megumin reveals that explosion magic is the only one she can use. Aqua says she is perfectly capable of learning other types of magic, but Megumin says she only wants to go kaboom. She admits it'll be easier to go on adventures if she learned other magic, but she still won't do it because logic isn't her strong suit. Aqua, being a girl herself, totally approves of her dumb ideology.
Women.
And Kazuma is left with the last remaining brain cell among the 3 of them. He knows Aqua is more useless than Sakura, and having Megumin on his team has only added to his worries because she's even worse. Despite that, he puts on a smile and decides to get paid at the guild. But Megumin sternly tells him she doesn't care about money as long as she gets to explode things. All she needs is a little bit of food and a place to live, and in return, she will blow everything in her path, including his meat saber. Kazuma jokes that her mighty powers will be wasted on a puny party of newbies, but she keeps insisting on joining their party, which leaves him with no choice. Their argument shifts to a physical brawl where Megumin starts choking him and admits no one else will take her. She begs him not to abandon her, and the bystanders feel bad for her, labeling Kazuma as a cruel man who's abandoning a poor little soul. They'd also notice the saliva on her face and assume Kazuma ran through her 7 times in a row, which further tanks his reputation. When he tries to clear the misunderstanding, Megumin starts playing along and blackmails him into accepting her into their party. That night, Luna confirms they had completed their quest, and Kazuma goes up 4 levels as a result. She explains he will grow strong faster since he's a new adventurer, and then presents him with a payment of 110,000 eras. However, Kazuma is sad because he has to share it with 3 people, even though he is the one who does most of the work. He believes this amount is not sufficient to risk one's life. While wishing to go back to Japan, he is approached by a blonde who says she saw his poster and wants to join his party. Kazuma turns around and sees a beautiful young knight standing confidently behind him, which makes him cream his pants. The girl then introduces herself as Darkness and starts stuttering, immediately losing all her aura. She then asks him about the girls whom he covered in his slime and asks if backshots are a part of his services. Kazuma ruins her imagination by telling her the truth, so she doubles back and says she won't let filthy monsters ruin such beautiful and tender girls. Kazuma immediately realizes she's freakier than your mom and advises her not to join his party. He goes on to list everything wrong with his party, but Darkness reveals she herself is quite useless because she always misses her attacks. She then shoves her face into Kazuma and excitedly says that he can still use her as a frontline shield, which causes his heart to race, controlling his urges. He tells her he cannot use a woman as a shield, but every excuse he makes falls on deaf ears, making him realize she's worse than he thought. The next day, he heads to the guild and finds Aqua doing party tricks for strangers, which affirms her status as a waste of space. During lunch, he learns he can use level points to learn new skills, but hasn't done it so far because he doesn't want to waste his points on useless skills. Megumin says he'll need to find someone to teach him a skill, and it'll automatically appear on his card once he masters it. When he asks if she can teach him explosion magic, Megumin's eyes suddenly light up, and she promises to help him to the best of her ability. Seeing her be overly enthusiastic, Kazuma tells her to calm down, little one, causing her to suddenly become dark and gloomy. Later, Kazuma wonders if there's any skill he can learn easily with his 3 points, but is interrupted by Darkness again, who wants to continue their conversation from last night. She then asks if she can join his party, and when Kazuma quickly turns her down, she starts twitching like she got her kitty slapped. Just then, her friend approaches her and tells her not to act this way or she'll scare people off. She then introduces herself as Chris the Thief. She then explains he can learn the thief skill from her since it's easy and requires a few points, and all he has to do is buy her a drink. Later, she tells him about thief skills, including enemy detection and lurk. But her personal favorite is steal, which she demonstrates by stealing his coin pouch. She then challenges him to learn the skill on his own and steal the pouch back from her. And even though there's a risk of him losing all his money, he has been craving this moment and accepts the challenge. Chris then asks him to look at his card and acquire the skill, and Kazuma finally learns it. After that, she asks him to perform it on her, explaining that he can also steal a dagger from her that's worth 400,000 eras. However, she is also carrying a bunch of useless pebbles, which will lower the odds of him getting the big prize. Without thinking much, Kazuma casts the spell and ends up hitting the jackpot, leaving Chris flustered. Later, he returns to the guild with a moist Darkness and a sad Chris, and Darkness explains to the girls that he managed to do the unthinkable. Chris then explains that he made him give her all of her money in exchange for her underwear, and everyone present at the guild starts thinking he's a creep. Aqua asks if he managed to learn any skills, and he demonstrates steal once again by making Megumin go commando. She then politely asks him to return her unmentionables, and Kazuma is confused as to why he's stealing the same thing again and again when it should be random. Darkness uses this opportunity to label him as the next Drake and promises to punish him if he doesn't let her join his party. When he says no, she starts twitching again, and Aqua realizes she's the same girl who approached Kazuma last night. Checking her card, Megumin learns she's a crusader and they should definitely let her join. Kazuma is still hesitant and tells them he plans to defeat the Devil King, and the road ahead is going to get more and more dangerous. He tries to scare her off by saying that if she were to get caught, the Devil King would surely use his meat sword on her. But little does he know she's been on backorder for some pipe since birth. Realizing she's hopeless, Kazuma turns to Megumin and reminds her of the dangers of his quest. However, his speech ends up motivating her even more to blow the Devil King. The only person he manages to scare is Aqua, which is ironic because she is the only one who must stay by his side. Just then, all the adventurers are asked to gather at the front gate for an emergency quest, and the whole city quickly falls into chaos. Soon after, everyone gathers outside, and while Darkness vows to protect Kazuma, Megumin takes the front and prepares her strongest spell. Just then, a swarm of flying cabbages attacks the city, and all the adventurers rush to take them down. Turns out this is pretty normal in this world, because cabbages refuse to get eaten and would rather die a natural death in a deserted place. Luna then takes the mic and tells the adventurers that the harvest season has arrived, and the guild will pay 10,000 eras for every head harvested. Darkness uses this opportunity to show her skill to Kazuma, but she fails to land a single hit. When a bunch of cabbages surround two men, she jumps in front of them and takes all the hits to protect them. As her armor breaks down, people ask her to save herself, but she refuses to leave, not because she's honorable, but because she's getting moist seeing all the men stare at her jiggle physics. Just then, Megumin prepares her spell and causes a massive explosion, which takes care of all the cabbages in the area. That night, everyone is treated to a fine meal of cabbage, and Aqua takes the time to praise Darkness for her bravery. Darkness says she's built diff, and protecting someone with her body is all she's good at. Megumin compliments Aqua for using her healing magic to keep the cabbages fresh and help the wounded, but the real MVP is Megumin, who took out all the cabbages in a single attack. They also praise Kazuna, who used the lurk skill to sneak behind the enemy, and then used steel to remove their wings, allowing him to capture them with ease. Aqua gives him the title of the Great Cabbage Thief, making him regret every choice he's made so far. Darkness once again asks him to let her join, and Aqua adds that with her addition, their party will have 3 advanced class members. Kazuma thinks to himself that he wouldn't have any issue if Darkness weren't lacking brain cells, but she's a freak like the rest of his party members. Despite that, he has no choice but to accept her and complicate his life even further. A few days later, Kazuma learns a pathetic water spell and believes he's not a little bit more of an adventurer. Darkness arrives and tells him she repaired her armor using the money she got from their cabbage quest, but the guy isn't too interested in it. She gently asks him to compliment her more often, but they're distracted by Megumin trying to enchant her kitty using her magical staff. Meanwhile, Aqua is arguing with Luna over not receiving a full reward, but Luna tells her that the yield she brought has lettuce mixed in it, and since lettuce sells cheap, she won't get the same reward as others. Aqua then walks up to Kazuma and asks how much he made, and he casually drops that he's now a millionaire. He explains the cabbages he got were worth a lot, and it's thanks to his high luck stat. Aqua starts glazing him, hoping he'd share some of his wealth with her, but when he says no, she starts begging him, explaining she's already used all of her money. However, Kazuma turns her down again because she had earlier suggested that they shouldn't share rewards. In the end, Aqua says she'll let him explore her Chamber of Secrets if he lends him some money, and Kazuma gives her some money so she can stop defaming him. Later, Kazuma finally gets himself an adventurer's outfit and the girls comment that he looks like the real deal now. With their new gear, the squad decides to go on another quest, but as soon as Kazuma mentions the toads, Aqua and Megumin are hit with PTSD. They enter the notice board to find some quests and come across one to slay a giant beast called Black Fong. Kazuma notices that the board only has high-level quests, and Luna explains the reason. As it turns out, the Devil King's top leaders moved in near town recently, and because of that, all the weak monsters have left the area. That night, Kazuma discusses this with Aqua, explaining that they won't find good work until the problem is taken care of. The next day, Megumin takes Kazuma to practice, explaining that she will pass out after using her spell, so she needs him to carry her home. On their way to a discreet area, they come across an abandoned castle and Megumin decides to use her spell on it, thinking no one would mind. After casting the spell, she sets the whole place ablaze and passes out, and Kazuma has to carry her home. In the meantime, Aqua works hard at her part-time job to make some money, and Darkness leaves for her hometown to do some training. Since Megumin had nothing better to do, she would blow up the abandoned castle every day and have Kazuma carry her back. This continued for many days to come, and Kazuma took it upon himself to rate each explosion. One of these days, Megumin hits the castle with her best explosion yet and even convinces Kazuma to learn it in the future. One day, Aqua returns from work with a lot of leftover food, and while she is enthusiastic about tomorrow, Kazuma believes they will never be able to take down the Devil King. He believes it's because he doesn't have any amazing powers like other protagonists, and someone who is more capable of it should be sent instead. Aqua starts to panic thinking she'll never be able to go home this way, but he tells her it's her own incompetence, despite being a goddess. As she bursts into tears, he tells her to at least teach him her healing magic, but she refuses to because that's the only thing that makes him relevant. Later, she cries her eyes out in front of the other girls, and Megumin asks Kazuma to go easy on her. Darkness, on the other hand, asks him to clap her instead. But Kazuma quickly realizes that Aqua is pretending to be sad to get sympathy. Just then, Luna calls for an emergency and asks all the adventurers to arm themselves. Quickly, all of them gather at the front gate and are confronted by an undead knight, Beldia, who is the leader of the Devil's King's army settled nearby. He then asks which of them Morans has been firing explosions at his castle every day.
Yeah, boy.
The adventurers brainstorm to figure out who it could be, and the only one that comes to their minds is an innocent girl who can't even use explosion magic. Megumin can't let someone else pay for her crimes, so she mans up and confronts the knight on her own. The knight starts complaining and asks Megumin to attack his castle head-on instead of attacking him from a distance. He reminds her that he left this town unharmed because there are only small fires here, but if he continues this behavior, they'll have no choice but to attack them. Megumin doubles down on her stupidity, claiming that she attacked him every day on purpose because she wanted to lure him out. She claims he's fallen for her trick and has come here all alone. And while Kazuma doesn't buy a word of it, the rest of them seem to think she's a genius. The knight warns her not to do it again and is about to leave, but Megumin refuses to back down and says she'll continue to attack. She then asks for Aqua's aid, who rushes in and quickly summons her staff. The knight doesn't fall for her bluff and casts a death spell on Megumin, but Darkness quickly jumps ahead and tanks the spell, causing Kazuma to rush to her aid. However, it is too late, and the knight declares that she will die in 1 week. He then tells Megumin to reflect on her actions, as it all could have been avoided if she hadn't been a brat. Since the only way to lift the curse is to obey the knight's commands, Darkness starts to think she'll have to let Beldia slap her kitty to survive this spell. Excited by finally losing her V-card, she gets all excited and asks Kazuma to tell her what to do. Before he can even answer, she runs towards Beldia and asks him to take her to Pound Town, but Kazuma stops her from embarrassing herself even more than she already has. Beldia ignores Darkness's antics and tells Megumin to come to his castle if she wishes to save her friend. He says he'll lift the curse if she makes it to his room, but it'll be very difficult since it's guarded by his minions. After he leaves, the responsibility weighs heavy on Megumin, and she decides to head to the castle immediately. Kazuma says he was partly responsible for it, because he was there when she exploded the castle day after day, so he should also join her on her mission. Megumin says normal weapons won't work against the undead, but she is a little happy that he will have to rely on her. Darkness, however, asks them not to risk their lives for her. But before they can talk further, Aqua just casts a spell and lifts the curse, much to their shock. A few days later, Kazuma once again grumbles about the dull, disappointment-filled life he's been living in this so-called fantasy world. He wants to raid dungeons and slay dragons, but he's stuck as an average Joe doing 9 to 5. Later at the guild, Aqua is in a bad mood and insists they take on a quest, mainly to clear the mountain of debt she's managed to pile up. She then crawls onto Kazuma and begs him to help her, and the guy can't believe a goddess can be so pathetic. It allows her to pick a quest, but when she tries to pick a mission involving a turf war between a manticore and griffin, Kazuma immediately shoots it down for being way out of their league. Instead, she settles on a task to purify a lake near Axel, which will force the brutal alligators infesting it to leave. Kazuma is initially surprised she has that power, but then tells her she can keep all the rewards since she's going to be doing it alone. However, while Aqua can purify any water she touches, it'll take her hours to purify an entire lake, and there's a high chance monsters will attack her while she's busy radiating her goddess powers. So naturally, she asks the rest of the party to act as her personal security team. Kazuma, however, opts for a more efficient approach by renting a small iron cage from the guild, locking Aqua inside like a wild animal. Surprisingly, she accepts her humiliating fate with minimal whining. The crew hauls the cage all the way to Riverhead Lake, lowers it into the shallows, and lets Aqua do her work while they lounge safely on the shore. As Aqua sits in the cold water for 2 hours, channeling her divine essence into the lake, the group casually chats about random topics, including how Aqua plans to handle bathroom breaks. However, she tells Kazuma that it's common knowledge that girls don't poop. Megumin tells him that crimson demons, like herself, don't need to use the bathroom either, and Darkness tries to pass the vibe check too, even though she's a minute away from wetting herself. However, Kazuma doesn't buy into their story and says he'll take a really long quest next time to see if they can last a whole day or not. As they continue yapping, the brutal alligators start circling, gnawing, and slamming into the cage, while Aqua panics and fires off desperate purification spells. As she gets subjected to the horror, Darkness gets moist because getting run through by alligators is one of her many weird fantasies. 5 grueling hours later, the lake sparkles with purity, and the alligators are all gone. The group approaches to check on Aqua, only to learn that she has been mentally shattered. She breaks down into tears and refuses to step out of the cage, even after they allow him to keep all the rewards. She says she'll spend the rest of her life in this cage and asks them to carry her back to town in it. Elsewhere, 2 girls are fighting a dragon on a volcanic top when a holy swordsman, Kuya, shows up and defeats it with his magical sword. Later, he is accompanied by the girls Crimea and Theo, whom he rescued, and they start arguing among themselves on who gets to ride his monster truck that night. Kuya, however, has vowed to save this world from the Devil King and intends to keep his promise to the goddess who sent him to this world. Just then, he hears Aqua singing in the distance and rushes to see her locked in a cage. As the bystanders watch, Kazuma asks her to get out of the cage because it makes them look bad, but she is so traumatized that she would rather die inside than even step foot into the world. The moment Kuya sees Aqua, his precious mommy, being dragged around like a soggy street cat, he rushes to break open the cage and free her. Aqua perks up from the praise, though she awkwardly fails to remember who Kuya even is until Kazuma reminds her. With a boost to her ego, she confidently declares herself a goddess. After learning the whole story, Kuya confronts Kazuma for dragging Aqua into this world, but Aqua says she's having a lot of fun. He gets even more furious when he learns Kazuma is making her live in a stable and treating her like livestock. He tells Kazuma that he should be lucky because he's living in a harem of baddies. But in reality, all Kazuma can think of is Aqua crying, Megumin blowing stuff up, and Darkness begging for pain. Kuya offers to simp for Megumin and Darkness by inviting them into his own party, only to be flatly rejected by both, who find him cringeworthy at best. Offended, Kuya challenges Kazuma to a duel with Aqua's allegiance on the line. Kazuma quickly accepts and immediately catches him off guard with a sneak attack, swiping his signature sword Gram and knocking him unconscious with it. His pick-me thoughts Crimea and Theo begin scolding Kazuma and remind him that only Kuya can use the sword, but Kazuma decides to take it with him nonetheless. When they continue arguing, Kazuma silences them by threatening to steal what is most precious to them. The next day, Aqua storms into the guild to yell at Luna after discovering that most of her reward has been docked to cover the cost of the cage Kuya destroyed. Just then, Kuya returns, ready to accuse Kazuma of all sorts of crimes against women, based on intel he got from Chris. Before he can finish, Aqua punches him straight in the face and demands he pay up for the broken cage. Kiuya pays her immediately, and she happily heads to the counter to buy herself a drink. Kiuya then begs Kazuma to return his sword and promises to buy him the finest sword in the shop in return. However, once he learns that Kazuma sold it for quick cash, he runs off in disbelief. After he leaves, Darkness asks Kazuma why Kiuya was referring to Aqua as a goddess, and the two of them decide to tell the truth. Just then, Luna announces a citywide summons for all adventurers to gather at the gates. There they come face to face with Beldia, the Dulladan, who is absolutely livid that no one bothered to visit his castle after all the trouble he went through. Kazuma tells him they haven't disturbed him since last time, but is furious when he finds out that Megumin has been secretly continuing their daily explosion routine at the abandoned castle, despite his repeated warnings. Megumin explains she was satisfied with attacking empty fields first, but ever since she has had the taste of blowing up that castle, she cannot hold herself back anymore. Kazuma asks how she walked back after the explosion since she usually passes out, only to learn that Aqua has been her partner in crime ever since he retired. Their tomfoolery has once again drawn the wrath of Beldia, who now stands outside the city gates, seething with rage, accusing them of letting Darkness die from his curse. Just as tension rises, Darkness steps forward, very much alive, which leaves Beldia momentarily stunned. Aqua takes this chance to mock him for not realizing that his curse has already been dispelled and casually casts a spell called Turn Undead, which sends a sharp jolt of pain through the undead knight. Realizing that someone as powerful as Aqua is residing in Axel, Beldia unleashes his fury by summoning an army of undead knights and commanding them to slaughter the townspeople. However, instead of charging the civilians, the undead immediately turn their attention to Aqua, instinctively drawn toward her divine presence. Screaming in terror, Aqua runs through the city and Kazuma jokingly says these undead are seeking salvation from a goddess. Soon after, Aqua takes a lap and runs back towards the adventurers. Now, with only Kazuma beside her, both of them weave through chaos as the undead give chase. Kazuma asks Aqua to do something about the army, but she says her spells are not working on them. Seizing the moment, Megumin gets on high ground and readies her explosion spell. Once Aqua and Kazuma leap to safety, Megumin releases a powerful blast that obliterates the gathered undead, earning a roar of applause from the other adventurers, and even earning herself a few new nicknames. However, as Kazuma carries her to safety, she asks him to remember the names of these fools who've given her cringeworthy nicknames, so she can blow them up later. Though most of his army is reduced to ash, Beldia himself survives the attack. Adventurers rushed forward in an attempt to finish the fight, but Beldia, tossing his own head high into the air, uses the elevated view to track everyone on the battlefield and counterattack with deadly precision. While Kazuma realizes that Kiuya would have helped if he weren't weaponless, Darkness charges ahead alone, determined to stop Beldia's advance. Despite looking like a strong contender, her attacks miss their mark as always, allowing Beldia to slowly rip through her armor. Rather than retreating, Darkness spirals into another delusion and starts taking pleasure in being humiliated mid-battle. Seeing an opportunity, Kazuma uses Create Water in an attempt to weaken Beldia, who swiftly dodges the stream. Not giving up, Kazuma follows up with Freeze, temporarily trapping him in place. He tries to steal Beldia's sword, but their difference in levels prevents the attempt from succeeding. While wondering what Beldia is weak to, Kazuma recalls that undead enemies are vulnerable to water, so that must be the case for Beldia too. While Beldia aims to finish Darkness off, Kazuma quickly coordinates with the other mages to bombard Beldia with more water magic. As Beldia continues to evade, Kazuma turns to Aqua and urges her to do something because even someone as useless as her must know how to bend water. Out of all the times he insulted her, she chooses this one to rebel and wastes precious time by making him apologize to her. She then raises her hands to channel her power, and seeing the spell, Beldia tries to make an escape, only to be stopped by Darkness. Aqua ends up summoning a divine flood so powerful that it sweeps across the battlefield, even damaging the city's outer walls in the process. Now severely weakened, Beldia becomes vulnerable enough for Kazuma to successfully snatch his head with steel. He then introduces the rest of the adventurers to a game of football, and they all play using Beldia's head. Aqua then ends the battle by purifying the rest of him out of existence. Once the dust settles, Darkness kneels to offer a prayer for the fallen adventurers who had given her a place in their party. However, when she finds them alive and well, she discovers that Aqua has already resurrected them, leaving her in an awkward state. Kazuma tells her to chill out since she loves getting embarrassed, but she argues this isn't the type of humiliation she is into. The next day, while Kazuma is relieved to live another day, the guild is filled with the sound of celebration as the adventurers toast their victory and share stories of the battle. Luna arrives and tells Kazuma that his party is responsible for taking out Beldia, so they are rewarded with 30 million eras. Kazuma immediately calls a group meeting and tells the girls he plans to retire and pump shotties with that much money. The girls protest and remind him of his goal to defeat the Devil King, but Kazuma couldn't care less and pushes the idea of retirement. But just as it starts to take root, Luna adds that, while the party is receiving a generous reward, they are also responsible for covering the costs of the flood damage caused by Aqua's spell. The repair fees are even more than the reward, plunging them right back into debt. With his dreams of retirement crushed once again, Kazuma groans in frustration, vowing to defeat the Devil King, if only to finally free himself from the 3 idiots he has surrounded himself with. As the winter rolls in, most adventurers are staying warm indoors, but Kazuma is out at the guild, frustrated about not having enough money. Aqua shames him further by reminding him that he's forcing a pretty goddess like her to sleep in the hay. However, he scolds her, reminding her that they are in debt because of her. He also tells her his eyelashes were frozen solid because of the cold, and if they keep sleeping in the stables, he'll turn into a popsicle. Instead of taking responsibility, Aqua argues that they would have all been dead if she hadn't cast that spell, so they should be worshipping her instead. To fix her holier-than-thou attitude, Kazuma walks off, telling her to pay the debt on her own. When Darkness and Megumin show up, they ask if he was able to find a job for them, but he says he hasn't looked yet. They also notice that everyone except them is partying, and it's mainly because they got a buckload of money for helping defeat Beldia. As they gather around the quest board, Darkness finds a quest to hunt white wolves for 1 million eras, and the thought of getting run through by the beasts excites her. He quickly rejects, so Megumin shows him a quest about one-punch bears and then starts boasting about her own one-shot attack. Kazuma rejects it too because it's too dangerous, and then spots a scouting quest about something called the Destroyer. He believes that sounds like way too much trouble, so he settles on a quest to deal with snow sprites since they are paying 100,000 eras each. As Megumin starts yapping about the danger that lies ahead, Aqua leaves to get ready for the quest, and Darkness seems excited just because it has snow in the name. Soon after, the group bundles up and heads to a snowy forest where snow sprites are known to gather. Kazuma starts slicing at the little snow creatures as they run around, while Aqua happily bottles them up to use as magical mini-fridges in the summer. Megumin, being Megumin, fires off a massive explosion to take out a bunch of them, then collapses in the snow like always. Kazuma then checks up on her, and she happily tells him that she defeated a total of 9 sprites and even went up a level. Kazuma realizes that hunting these creatures is way too much fun, which makes him wonder why they're the only ones doing it. Just then, Darkness notices a presence in the woods, and Aqua explains that adventurers don't accept this quest because they're afraid of the Snow Sprite Master, also known as the Winter Shogun. Just then, the man himself shows up, who turns out to be a scary guardian spirit that looks like a samurai. Aqua adds that this guy is so powerful that even the Devil King has placed a bounty on his head. While Kazuma poots his pants, Darkness is thrilled and charges in, but her sword gets broken instantly. Aqua then tells them that the Shogun usually takes form based on his enemy's imagination, and since Kazuma is from Japan, he is blamed for his samurai form. Realizing how bad this is, Aqua quickly lets the sprites go and tells everyone to drop their weapons and beg for forgiveness. Seeing a goddess bow, Kazuma and Megumin listen, but Darkness is too proud and refuses to kneel. Panicking, Kazuma rushes to force her down, but forgets he's still holding his sword. The Shogun sees that as a threat and, without hesitation, slices off Kazuma's head. Kazuma wakes up in the afterlife, where the goddess Eris greets him kindly and offers her condolences for his fate. He immediately recalls that she is Aqua's junior and is much more empathic than her counterpart. When she offers to take him back to Japan and give him a peaceful life, he first asks her to send him to a rich family and make him really handsome. He even starts complaining right away about his crappy party, the bad luck, and everything that has happened so far, so he could earn more favors from her. However, in the midst of his rant session, he suddenly starts crying and realizes how much he actually misses his chaotic group. He understands that, even though he was annoyed with his circumstances, it was still a lot of fun, and he made good friends along the way. Right as he's about to leave, Aqua's voice booms in, calling for his soul to return. When she decides to resurrect him, Eris tells him he's not allowed to revive in the same world twice by the laws. However, Aqua calls BS and starts dissing Eris for making up these dumb rules. When she threatens to expose Eris for wearing cups to appear busty, she gets embarrassed and agrees to let Kazuma get revived. Suddenly, a magical circle appears around Kazuma, and Eris asks him to keep this a secret when he returns. Back in the real world, Kazuma wakes up to Megumin in darkness's hugs, and Aqua tells him that he should worship her for saving his life. However, he's still mad and refuses to thank her, thinking how peaceful Eris was in comparison. This pisses off Aqua, and when she tries to knock some sense into him, darkness steps in and ends the conflict. He then learns that he died in a horrible way at the hands of the Shogun, so he decides that they're way too weak to be taking winter quests like this. When they return to the guild, Aqua proudly reveals that she secretly kept one of the snow sprites. Kazuma tries to take it so he can cash it in for the reward, but Aqua refuses, saying she wants to use it as a personal fridge. Kazuma, now fully reminded of how weird his party is, just sighs and thinks to himself that Eris definitely seems like a true goddess, while his own teammates are just a bunch of idiots with way too much energy and no common sense. On a freezing night outside the stables, Aqua is sitting beside a campfire, trying to keep warm. When the wind almost blows the fire out, she reaches for Kazuma's Squid Games outfit to throw into the flames. However, he smacks her in the head and shuts that plan down immediately, stating that this is the only memento he has of his previous life. Aqua argues that there is nothing else to burn, and if he's not gonna let her burn his tracksuit, he might as well warm her up himself. Just then, the fire goes out, and while Aqua wallows in misery, Kazuma decides to do something about it. Later, they pay a visit to Wiz's magic shop, and before entering, Kazuma asks Aqua to behave. But the moment they step in, Aqua loses her mind and grabs Wiz by the collar. She asks him how dare she open a shop and live peacefully while she's freezing at the stables. But before things get out of hand, Kazuma smacks her in the head and rescues Wiz. After settling down, Aqua begrudgingly demands tea, and while Wiz innocently prepares it, Kazuma explains that she may look like a human, but is actually a lich. Despite that, she is a sweet soul who used to send wandering souls to heaven. But Kazuma and his squad somehow took that job, allowing her to peacefully open a shop here. As she brings tea, Aqua is shocked by how good it tastes, but still acts spiteful toward her, because she is an undead. Kazuma, on the other hand, reveals he has some skill points saved up and wants her to teach him some of Leech's tricks. At first, Aqua disapproves and flaunts her goddess status, stating that Leech are like slugs, but Kazuma argues that Wiz's skills can really help him during tough battles. Aqua then introduces herself as a goddess of the Axis Order, and Wiz gets on edge, stating she's seen a lot of psychos in her order. And since Aqua is the leader of that order, Wiz believes she belongs in a mental asylum. Aqua gets offended and starts bothering Wiz. Later, Wiz says she is impressed Kazuma and his squad were able to defeat Beldia, and when he asks how she knows about him, she reveals is also one of the 8 leaders of the Devil King's army. Aqua immediately pins her down, but she frantically explains that her only job is to maintain a protective barrier around the king's castle, and since she's never hurt anyone in her entire life, they won't get a bounty by handing them in. She later tells them they can open a path to the Devil King by defeating all of his leaders, but despite that, she wants to game end Wiz because she insulted her order. Wiz says they don't need to fight because she has no problems with them, even when they yeeted Beldia. She reveals he used to be a creep who would pretend to drop his head whenever she passed by so he could take a look at her flap factory. Wiz then agrees to teach him a skill and makes him learn Train Touch, a skill that lets him absorb magic. She demonstrates it on Aqua, but when Aqua resists, Kazuma smacks her in the head and tells her to let Wiz do her job. Later, while Kazuma learns the skill, Aqua grabs onto Wiz's hand and tries to purify her, and she almost succeeds, only for Kazuma to yank her at the last second. Just then, they get a request from a real estate broker and head to a ghost-infested mansion that needs clearing out. Before they move in, Aqua stands there pretending to scare everyone off with her eyes closed. However, they casually walk past her and start cleaning up the dusty place, while she's still outside telling ghostly stories to no one like a moron. Later that night, Kazuma heads to his new room and is delighted to finally have a bed to sleep on. He isn't worried about any ghosts with Aqua around, but gets startled when he hears her scream. As it turns out, someone stole her precious drink she's been saving for months, and she completely loses it. In a rage, she starts blasting turn undead spells all over the house. Later, Kazuma wakes up in the middle of the night needing to pee, only to find creepy floating dolls surrounding him. He runs for it and ends up in Aqua's room. Instead, Megumin is there, who says she saw some dolls and wanted Aqua to accompany her to the toilet. With no help coming from Darkness or Aqua, who are most likely hunting the ghosts, the two start bickering about who gets to go first, until the possessed dolls burst in and send them both running again. They make it to the toilet, and Megumin dives in first, but when the dolls show up again, Kazuma yanks her out mid-squat. In a run, she hands her a small bottle, so he can relieve himself once they are safe. They barricade themselves in another room while Megumin, panicking, starts chanting her explosion spell. As the noises get louder, Kazuma tells Megumin to make a run for it, while he uses the newly learned spells to hold back the dolls. As soon as they open the door, they find Aqua passed out from dealing with all the dolls. The next day, Kazuma and Aqua head to the guild to collect the reward for clearing out the mansion. But Lumen explains that the ghosts had only shown up because someone had cast a magic barrier around the local cemetery, which forced them into the house. Kazuma instantly realizes who's behind it and glares at Aqua. Cornered, she admits she set up the barrier because she didn't want to go to the cemetery every day for purification duty, and since it was their fault to begin with, they agree to give up the reward out of sheer shame. Later on, while Kazuma is out in the mansion yard cleaning up, Wiz quietly visits to thank him for everything he's done. Just when he thinks things have calmed down, he hears Aqua telling Darkness to use his tracksuit as fuel for the fireplace and rushes in to stop them. At night, Megumin and Darkness are playing some knockoff chess in the living room, while Kazuma is chilling on the sofa. Just then, Aqua starts whining at Kazuma to give up the comfiest spot because she's the highest level in their party. Kazuma realizes her stats haven't grown even once since they started out, but she says it's because they were all maxed out to begin with. He gives in, not out of kindness, but because he realizes Aqua's brain is running on only 2 brain cells, and both of them are on vacation. Now that they have a mansion to their name, they can survive the winter, but Kazuma isn't sure if he can survive the cesspool of idiocy around him. A few days later, Kazuma takes his party to Wiz's shop, where a girl named Union peeks nervously from behind the shelves before suddenly jumping out and challenging Megumin to a duel. She's also a crimson demon they ran into a while ago, and ever since that day, she's become a self-proclaimed rival of Megumin. Wiz casually mentions that Union's been spending her time in the shop just hoping to run into Megumin, which causes Union to panic and awkwardly pretend to be a customer by grabbing the nearest thing she can find, which happens to be a choker. Darkness kindly invites Union to visit their mansion. Megumin loses her patience with the awkward back and forth and starts shaking Union, which sends the choker flying and knocks a bunch of things into Kazuma, who's just trying to catch a moment of peace. When he picks up the choker, he's told it grants wishes. Megumin and Union keep bickering. Wiz is busy serving tea. Amid all this, Kazuma casually puts the choker on, only for Wiz to freeze in horror. She explains that it's a dangerous item popular with women trying to lose weight, and it can't be taken off unless the wearer's wish comes true. If not, it slowly tightens until it strangles the wearer to death in 4 days. Since Kazuma doesn't remember making a wish, the girls panic and all blame themselves for putting him in this situation. They'd all promise to find a way to help him, but Aqua shrugs it off and says she can just revive him if he dies. However, Kazuma says he wouldn't wish to be reincarnated if he dies again and wouldn't be around to fight the Devil King or pay off their debt. With that, Aqua panics too, and they all agree to do whatever it takes to fulfill his unknown wish. Back at the mansion, Kazuma goes full gremlin mode and nooks the situation. He demands to nap on Wiz's lap like they're dating and makes Darkness do push-ups and sit-ups without armor, so he can appreciate the jiggle physics of her chug jugs. He also sends Aqua out to buy him yakisoba bread and booze, and forces Megumin and Union to play rock, paper, scissors with a twist. Means both of them lose an item of clothing. In the end, Union loses the next match and lashes out, yanking Megumin's clothes off in frustration. By the end of the day, the choker hasn't budged, so Kazuma keeps pushing it until he takes revenge for all the times these girls messed with him. The next day, he lounges on Wiz's milk packs while Aqua fans him. Megumin and Union cosplay like cringe attackers. Darkness does squats nearby, and by the 3rd day, he's got Wiz, Megumin, and Union baiting him, while Aqua conjures up a hot spring in the bathroom, and he watches Darkness take a bath. But just when he thinks life can't get better, the hot spring erupts directly under him and scalds his Excalibur. That night, Kazuma demands a kiss from Wiz, but the girls have had enough. Aqua snaps and tells him that with only 1 day left, He needs to stop goofing around and seriously figure out his wish. Kazuma tries, but is unable to think of anything he wants. Later that night, Union asks Megumi why they're going so far for Kazuma, and she says he's the only one who carries her home after she passes out. Besides, he is the only one who accepts her with her flaws, so she will do anything she can to protect him. Union becomes determined to help him and will gladly get on his knees for him if Megumi tags along. On the final day, Kazuma calmly accepts his fate, saying heartfelt goodbyes to each girl, which leads to an emotional group hug. In that state, Kazuma finally gets a moment of peace after 11 episodes. Just as everyone's feelings are touched, Kazuma ruins the moment by confessing that he only likes each of them for their milkers, and the reason he carried Megumi back was so he could feel her melons on his back. He even admits he used to watch Aqua sleep when they were staying in the stables, and with that, he has no regrets and can die peacefully. Aqua refuses to accept this and starts shaking him violently, which causes the choker to fall off. Turns out, his wish was just to be comforted, and the hug had already fulfilled it. Furious and embarrassed, the girls decide to take revenge by putting the choker back on him, which ends with Kazuma getting sent straight to an annoyed heiress once again. As he sits there embarrassed, she tells him not to die in such a silly way again and sends him back to the girls. The next day, while aimlessly wandering around town, Kazuma spots two adventurers, Dust and Cave, lurking suspiciously in an alley like discount criminals. When he asks what they are up to, they reveal they're psyching themselves up to enter a secret cafe that only male adventurers know about. They say it is run by a smoking hot succubus who gives soul-snatching tongue twisters, which piques Kazuma's curiosity. He tags along and is surprised to see busty babes with enormous melons offering their services to the adventurers. Each one of them is taken to a separate booth, and Kazuma is seated beside a ruffian. Just then, receptionist Succubus learns it is his first time and politely explains how the cafe works. Since it gets hard living in stables, the Succubi offer guys custom-made dreams in exchange for a little vitality. Kazuma gets bricked up and eagerly fills out his form, only to learn that he can turn into anyone he wants and can have anyone as his partner in the dream. After some thought, he does not for a specific person, but for a beautiful, shy older woman with zero experience. In the end, the succubus asks him not to drink any alcohol, or his dream would be messed up. Back at the mansion, Kazuma walks into what feels like a seafood festival. Darkness explains her family sent over some fancy crabs to congratulate them for moving in, and the party's already elbows deep in cracking shells. Once he takes a bite from the crab, he goes into ecstasy and digs in like a maniac. When Aqua suggests pouring hot bubbly into the crab shells for extra flavor, Kazuma declines, knowing that if he gets too drunk, he won't be able to enjoy busty shawties in his dream. However, as he sees the girls having lots of fun, he wonders if he should just forget about the dream and live in the moment. Unable to resist, he decides to hit the bed early, but as he lies in bed, he realizes he's too hyped up to sleep, so he decides to take a hot bath to calm down. However, he dozes off right in the tub and wakes up to find Darkness casually strolling in. Though he panics initially, he then thinks his dream has officially kicked off, so he greets her with a grin on his face. Darkness falls to her knees because she's too embarrassed to face him, all while Kazuma thinks her milkers are even juicier than he imagined. Before she can ask why he's here, Kazuma gets out of the tub and casually asks her to wash his back. Darkness is caught off guard, but the situation lines up so perfectly with her twisted daydreams that she actually goes along with it, trying her best to act composed despite the rising chaos in her brain. She hesitates when drying him off, worrying Megumin or Aqua might walk in on them, but Kazuma keeps telling her to do her job because he believes he's in a dream. Just when things are getting awkward, Aqua suddenly yells that there's an intruder in the house. Kazuma panics and runs into the hallway in his towel, only to see a young rookie succubus tangled in Aqua's mansion-wide holy barrier. That's when it hits him that none of this was a dream, and he actually forced Darkness to wash his back.
Yeah, boy.
When Aqua decides to purify the succubus, he steps in to help the poor girl escape, but she blames herself for being inexperienced and asks him to let her be yeeted. When Kazuma refuses to let go, Darkness runs in and assumes he's under a charm spell, which explains why he was trying to slap her kitty earlier. The three of them then go up against Kazuma and beat the living crap out of him. The next morning, Kazuma plays it cool and pretends he was totally brainwashed by the succubus and doesn't remember anything that happened last night. Darkness is definitely thinking about getting backshots from him, but she plays it cool too, since she thinks he doesn't remember anything. Just then, Luna bursts in with an emergency broadcast, stating that the mobile fortress destroyer is heading straight for Axel. As Luna rushes through the town, warning people to evacuate, she also begs the adventurers to gather at the guild to help stop the mobile fortress destroyer. While most people are scrambling to pack up and escape, Aqua and Megumin are already throwing things into their bags, ready to run for their lives. Megumin explains that it's a definite death trap to fight the mobile fortress destroyer, and Darkness explains just how dangerous the destroyer really is. It crushes everything in its path, and unless someone stops it, Axel will be completely wiped out. Instead of running, Kazuma stands firm, refusing to let the mansion they worked so hard to get be destroyed just like that. At the guild, during an emergency meeting with the other adventurers, they learn that the mobile fortress destroyer will arrive at their city in 1 hour. One of the adventurers asks if there is any countermeasure to this giant, but Luna reveals it crushed its own creators, so they don't know. They know they would stand a chance if Kyuya were here, but thanks to Kazuma selling his sword, he's now useless. At first, they contemplate running away, but Kazuma asks Aqua to check if she can break the destroyer's barrier first. Even with that, they would need heavy-hitting firepower. Megumin is the perfect candidate for that task. Even with her power, she isn't confident she can take the destroyer down with a single attack, but there's no harm in trying. Just then, Wiz shows up and everyone starts cheering for him, as if she's got the recipe to defeat the enemy. Meanwhile, outside the city walls, construction workers quickly start setting up barricades, and Darkness volunteers to stand guard, ready to fight. Kazuma walks up to her and tells her to step inside because even she cannot tank an attack from the mobile fortress destroyer. In a rare moment of honesty, she opens up to Kazuma, revealing that her real name is Lalatina and that she's actually a noblewoman who has been given the duty of protecting the region. Understanding her stance, Kazuma decides to stand with her and teases her by calling her Lalatina.
Never call me by that name again!
As the massive destroyer finally appears in the distance, everyone is terrified just at the sheer size of the machine. Aqua then climbs up to the top of the city walls and casts a sacred break spell, shattering the magic barrier protecting the machine. With the barrier down, all that's left is for the mages to attack. Wiz is ready to take it down, but Megumin starts shaking in her boots until Kazuma hypes her up. With that, both of them unleash their magic at the same time and manage to stop Mobile Fortress Destroyer just before it reaches the city. Everyone starts celebrating, thinking the crisis is over, but their joy is cut short when the destroyer suddenly announces it's going to self-destruct. Instead of panicking like the rest of them, Darkness charges straight at the fortress with a crazy look on her face, excited by the danger and ready to take the blast head-on. The other adventurers, thinking she's making a heroic attempt to stop the detonation, rush after her in support, though some of them admit they're really just trying to save their favorite spots, like the Succubus Cafe. While Megumin is left outside, unable to move after using her magic, Kazuma leads Aqua and Wiz into the fortress to search for its control room, hoping to find a way to stop the explosion. Inside, they find a skeleton of a man sitting on a throne, and Aqua tells them the man died peacefully without any accident. They also find a book beside him and learn that he is the creator of this weapon. Back then, he was told to create a weapon of infinite energy, and some adventurers actually brought him the power source that he desired. However, once he created the weapon, it turned on the city and caused a rampage. He had nowhere to run, so he hid inside the fortress and let time take his life. Later, the squad locates Coronatite, the energy source of the destroyer, and Wiz suggests they use a teleportation spell to take it out. However, she doesn't have enough magic, so she asks Kazuma to lend her some.
Would you please let me suck it out?
Absolutely.
Parallel. Rain touch! I think I have enough to use my teleportation spell.
Good for you.
With her magic recharged, Wiz worries her teleport might take them to a densely populated area, but Kazuma swears he'll take full responsibility if that happens. Once the core is safely removed, the squad exits the machine, but it starts heating up, and Wiz explains that all the internally stored power will cause another explosion. Kazuma can't lend more magic to Wiz, and Aqua's magic will purify her, so they are out of options. Just then, Ruffian brings Megumin by carrying her on his back, and Kazuma uses Drain Touched to absorb magic from Aqua and give it to Megumin. She then charges up her spell and fires off an explosion so big it nukes the entire area, turning the Mobile Fortress Destroyer into dust. After the chaos finally settles and the destroyer is no longer a threat, the people of Axel slowly return to their everyday lives. The streets get lively again, shops reopen, and it feels like the town can finally breathe. But just when things start to feel normal, a squad of knights shows up from the royal capital, bringing a whole new kind of trouble. When Kazuma and the other adventurers gather at the guild to meet the knights, the mood shifts fast. The knights aren't there to celebrate the victory or thank them for saving the city. The prosecutor introduces herself as Sina and explains that the chunk of Coronatite that Kazuma had teleported to save Axel ended up crashing straight into the mansion of the local governor. Before Kazuma can even try to explain, the prosecutor formally charges him with treason, turning the town hero into a wanted criminal in an instant. Megumin argues that Kazuma actually saved them all from imminent death, and the only crime he's ever committed is striking at a minor chord. Even Darkness steps up, asking Sina to reconsider because even though he eyes her melons like a creep, he's only ever helped people around here. Kazama argues he hasn't done such a thing, and everything he did in the bath was only because he was under that succubus's control. Darkness finally realizes that he does remember everything that happened and vows to chop off his millimeter Peter for trying to swipe her V card. Soon enough, all the adventurers start chanting Kazuma's name, pleading his innocence, but all the chants stop once Sina tells them they will also be charged with treason if they keep supporting him. Hearing this, even his own squad mates leave his side and start making excuses to free themselves from his crime. Darkness, on the other hand, gets excited at the idea of being handcuffed and tells Sina that she was the one who did it. Sina reminds her that she was only being a meat shield, and hearing the word meat makes her cookie moist. Just then, Wish shows up to take the blame, but Aqua quickly covers her mouth, telling her not to take the fall for Kazuma. Realizing his friends have turned their backs on him, Kazuma turns to the other adventurers, only to learn they don't want anything to do with him either. Sina then orders the knights to arrest him, and the next thing he knows, he is locked up, crying like a little bitcon. Just then, he notices Aqua outside his cell window, who reveals she's come here to break him out. She also explains that Megumin is distracting the guards using her explosion magic, so they only have a limited time to skedaddle. Kazuma believes running away will make things worse, but Aqua reminds him that he might be executed soon, so it's better to take that risk. Agreeing to run away, he asks Aqua about her plan, and she hands him a metal wire, telling him to lockpick the door and escape using stealth. However, the lock turns out to be a combination lock, so Kazuma throws the wire out and goes back to sleep. The following night, Aqua shows up again and reveals that Megumin and Darkness were suspected to be behind last night's explosion, so she made them wear masks today. She then asks Kazuma why he didn't go through with the plan, only to learn that they're stopped by a combination lock. She then hands him a saw so he can cut through the window, but Kazuma is too short to reach. Aqua decides to give him a box to stand on, but the box is too big to pass through the bars, so Kazuma decides to sleep again. The next day, Sina conducts a little interview with the guy and shows him a magic bell that will ring every time he lies. She then asks him where he came from and what he did before he became an adventurer. He truthfully tells her that he's from Japan and he used to be a student, but the bell goes off for some reason. Kazuma argues he's telling the truth, but then realizes that it was only half the truth. He tells Sina that while he's actually from Japan, he used to stay home all day like a fat Discord mod and play games. Sina finds it strange that she's never heard of Japan before, but continues the questioning, asking why he became an adventurer in the first place. Kazuma says he thought it was cool, and he'll get all the curvy shawties of the town. She then asks if he has a grudge against them, and Kazuma admits he does because they're treating the town hero like trash. He then goes on a rant about how all he wanted to do was to save people, and the bell doesn't ring, which tells Sina that he's actually not a bad guy. When she apologizes for her actions, Kazuma pushes his luck and tells her that she can lose her license for being so rude to the town hero. Surprisingly, Sina buys into his bluff, getting all red and apologetic for treating him like a criminal. He then demands she bring him tea to make up for everything, and she abides by his request. However, he starts yelling at her like a dad-bod husband for not getting the temperature right. She continues to apologize for her actions, but as soon as Kazuma calls her a sad virgin, she suddenly goes back to being all serious and tells him not to push his luck. Lastly, she asks him if he has any connection with the Demon King or his army, and Kazuma says no. However, the bell rings, and it is too late for him to remember that Wiz actually used to be one of his generals. Soon after, Kazuma is brought to a public court for his hearing, and while the guy is hyperventilating, Megumin and Darkness tell him not to worry because he's done nothing wrong. They notice a blonde man eyeing them non-stop, and darkness reveals he's Lord Aldarp, whose house Kazuma blew. As the trial begins, Senna steps forward and accuses Kazuma of treason, and her first witness happens to be Chris. She asks Chris about the time when Kazuma stole her plot armor, but before Chris can explain the whole thing, a girl in the crowd vows to have seen the whole thing with her own eyes.
No further questions!
For her second witness, she brings Kuya to the stands and asks if Kazuma stole his sword and sold it. Kuya admits it actually happened, but before he could say it was because he lost it in a duel,
no further questions!
She then calls Cremia and Fio to the stands, and they accuse Kazuma of trying to diddy them up in public. As another man from the crowd testifies,
no further questions!
The whole audience starts throwing shade at Kazuma's character. Kazuma starts panicking, thinking he's going to get hanged, and even Lord Aldarp orders his execution. However, Megumin calls for an objection, saying that everything presented against Kazuma is inadmissible as evidence. She demands some legitimate basis for the accusations, and Senna reveals that he flooded the entire town while defeating Dullahan, and his continuous use of explosion magic has damaged the terrain. Unbeknownst to her, it was Aqua and Megumin who did all those things, not Kazuma. And lastly, she accuses him of using the skill drain, which can only be used by the undead. She even mentions that the bell rang when he said he's got no connection to the Demon King's army, and it seems that Kazuma really will get executed for the crimes he never committed. However, Kazuma takes a stand for himself, loudly yelling that he is not a terrorist and he has not sided with the Demon King. When the bell does not ring, the judge realizes that Kazuma is innocent and is about to revoke all the charges against him. However, Aldarp uses his influence to force the judge to change his ruling, and Kazuma is seconds away from being ruled a criminal. Just then, Darkness stands up and asks the judge to hear her out. She then shows everyone her Dustiness family crest and uses her family name to request a delay in the trial. In return, she is willing to do anything for Aldarp, and the man agrees in hopes that he can slap that royal cookie. That evening, Kazuma returns to the mansion and thanks Darkness for what she did, right before she leaves to deal with Aldarp. As soon as she leaves, the king's men arrive and seize all their assets as a debt, leaving them with absolutely nothing. A few days later, it starts to snow outside, and the squad has nothing to keep themselves warm. As Kazuma and Aqua wallow in their misery, Megumin arrives with a black cat in her hands, saying she wants to keep it as a pet. Kazuma pets her, but when Aqua tries it, the cat suddenly gets aggressive. Afterward, they talk about Darkness, who was supposed to be back by now, and they're worried Aldarp folded her so hard she had to relearn how to walk. There's nothing they can do for her now, so Kazuma advises them to be nice to her once she returns. Just then, Senna barges open the door and demands that Kazuma come with her. Turns out, when Megumin caused explosions near the prison to help break him out, it woke up the giant toads in the area, and now he's asked to clean the mess. As Aqua runs away from a toad, Kazuma notices that they haven't slowed down one bit despite the snow. Just then, Megumin shows up, with half her body inside a toad's mouth. She explains that it's her way of keeping her body warm, and that she's already used her spell to take out multiple other toads. Kazuma then turns his attention to the toad chasing Aqua and pulls out a bow. As he shoots an arrow, he explains how his squad lacked any ranged attacks, so he learned a skill called Snipe. This skill grows more accurate with luck, which is perfect for Kazuma, since luck is all he has. Despite the accuracy, Kazuma's attack has no effect on the toad, so he has to use his sword to defeat it. Soon after, more toads show up, and the three of them begin running away from them. Just then, one of the toads yoinks Senna with its tongue, and as they stop in horror, Aqua is also swallowed. As Kazuma runs for his life, he notices that Megumin is also getting swallowed and wishes Darkness were here. Just then, someone casts a lightning spell and eliminates all the toads at once. Kazuma thanks her for saving them, but she says she only saved them because she didn't want her rival Megumin to die at a toad's hand. She then turns to Megumin to challenge her to a duel, but Megumin has no idea who this fool is. When Kazuma politely greets her, she is happy to know that he's not making fun of her weird name. But Kazuma says they have even weirder names around, like this crazy explosion girl over here. Union then challenges Megumin to a duel, but she says it's too cold to fight, much to Union's frustration. Meanwhile, Senna turns to Kazuma and tells him that even though they've helped, she still isn't convinced of his innocence. After they leave, Megumin tells Union that she doesn't have any magic left, so they can have a battle of martial arts if she wants. Union recalls how Megumin never attended the martial arts class at the academy, and how she bullied her every day to steal her lunch. Kazuma looks at her with judgmental eyes, but Megumin says Union's lunch was the only thing keeping her alive. With that, the girls commence their martial arts battle, and just judging by their stances, Kazuma figures Union has this in the bag. However, Union notices that she's covered from head to toe in toad slime, and she's using this to disgust her so she'd stop fighting. Once the sun shines on her, Megumin runs after Union, finally catching up to her and covering her body in disgusting slime, which causes her to give up. Meanwhile, at Aldarp's mansion, Darkness finds herself getting bodied by his maids, who are forcing her into submission. As Kazuma and Megumin walk home, she gives him a magical orb she got from the toads, asking him to use it to pay their debt. When he asks why she doesn't use his for herself, she says mages like her are beyond social norms. Kazuma lets out a sigh, and when she asks why he's complaining, she says she's prettier than the other girls to get her off his chest. However, Megumin plays along and decides to give him a hug, covering him in slime as well. As they return to the mansion, Megumin tries to play with her cat, but it runs away after smelling her. Kazuma then decides to hit the shower, but Megumin calls dibs because she's just a girl. However, Kazuma believes in gender equality, and they both start fighting over who gets to shower first. When Megumin refuses to fold, Kazuma starts undressing to scare her off, but she actually follows in his footsteps, saying she'll join him. Kazuma actually calls her bluff, asking him to scrub his back, but Megumin suddenly starts acting like she accidentally walked into a ditty party. Kazuma then goes on a rant about how he doesn't believe in cliché love stories, and he wouldn't let a lady screw him over, which causes Megumin to back off. As she's about to leave, he calls her a wuss for backing out, so Megumin changes her mind and now forces him to have a bath with her. After their battle of towels, the duo heads inside where they relax in warm water, alongside their newly adopted cat. Kazuma asks her if Union is going to be okay, and Megumin says she'll come back to challenge her again. Kazuma finds it hard to believe they're the same age because Union's got some juicy melons, whereas she's as flat as a tire. Megumin gets upset and says that she'll develop to size jugs in 2 years, which will make him regret his words. As their conversation deepens, Kazuma realizes that this isn't a good idea because anyone who walks in will get the wrong impression. Just then, Aqua returns to the mansion, and they hear her calling out their names. Since he's in the shower with a 4-foot shorty, Kazuma doesn't want a "they not like us too" written in his name, so he uses a freeze spell on the door. However, he runs out of mana and collapses once it's done. After Aqua leaves, Kazuma tells Megumin that he cannot move a muscle, so he needs her help in drying off. However, Megumin is upset that he thinks she's still a loli and beats him up. The next day, they visit Wiz's shop to sell the orb but run into Union, who acts surprised to see them when in reality she has been coming here daily to meet them. Kazuma says she could have just come to their mansion if she needed to meet them, but she thinks that's bad manners. Megumin then reveals that Union never made friends because she was too embarrassed by her name, which is why she acts like she has an extra chromosome. She then tells Union that she doesn't want to do magic duels since she can only use explosion magic, and Union is shocked to learn that she's obsessed with destruction. As the two begin arguing, Aqua spots a magic crystal in the background and suggests they use it to help Union make friends, since only a skilled mage can use this crystal. Union challenges Megumin to see who can use it more effectively. She accepts her challenge, and both start channeling their magic into the crystal, causing it to project memories onto the entire shop. In one of them, Megumin is seen stealing bread, while another shows Union celebrating her birthday all alone. As they look through more memories, they find Megumin doing odd jobs to have food, and Union making desperate attempts to make friends. Embarrassed about her past, Megumin yeets the crystal on the floor, and Wiz puts it on Kazuma's tab, even though he had nothing to do with it, since it got them nowhere. Union calls their battle a draw and proposes a new challenge to see who has grown more. Megumin says she's old enough to have a bath with Kazuna, which makes her so embarrassed that she runs away, admitting defeat. Unbeknownst to her, Megumin is keeping track of all their duels and is happy that she won again. As time passes, Kazuma and Megumin continue their routine of doing daily explosions, whether it's snowing, raining, or sunny. However, it suddenly hits Kazuma that they don't have any money, and he starts crying. Later, the squad gathers at the guild, and since they don't have money to buy food, they decide to hit the dungeon tomorrow. Megumin starts ranting that she is useless inside dungeons because she can't use her magic, but Kazuma tells her to carry their bags in that case. Aqua calmly suggests they wait till darkness returns, but Kazuma angrily explains that they don't have a penny in her name. He then pulls out a poster for a beginner's dungeon, and even though it's been explored, Luna reveals that a new passage has been discovered recently. There was going to be a large-scale quest, Since there could be treasure in this new passage, Kazuma hopes to get lucky and pay his debt off. Later, they arrive at the dungeon entrance, and Megumin reveals it was created by the kingdom's greatest arch-wizard long ago. They wonder what must be hiding in there, so Kazuma decides to go in first as a scout while the girls stay outside. Heading down the dark stairway, Kazuma explains that he has enemy detection and lurk skills, so he can avoid any danger coming his way. He also has the skill of foresight, which basically gives him night vision. Just then, he notices Aqua, who has joined her anyway because she's the goddess of debt and loans, who can do anything she wants. Even though she lost most of her powers, she still has some divine tricks up her sleeve. Just then, she finds an empty chest, and as she continues yapping about it, following the map, the duo arrives at the newly discovered pathway, and Aqua is hopeful they will find riches inside. As they go down another dark stair, both Aqua and Kazuma start getting sweaty because they're scared of what they might face inside. Aqua says she'll skedaddle before she runs into monsters, or before Kazuma decides to try to strokes on her. Kazuma, on the other hand, jokes that it would be the perfect opportunity to ditch her in the depths of the dungeon. Kazuma then notices something approaching and asks Aqua to keep her guard up, but she annoyingly keeps yapping. Suddenly, a speeding monster approaches them, and they almost die at its hands, all thanks to Aqua's nonsense. Once they beat it, Aqua reveals it's just a weak-level gremlin, and they often appear in low-level dungeons. As they go down, they run into a skeleton of an adventurer, which freaks Kazuma out, but Aqua stays calm and guides his soul to the heavens. Afterward, the two continue down the dungeon, marking paths as they go. However, they are unable to find any loot in the process. When Aqua finally finds a treasure chest, she is eager to open it, but Kazuma stops her, warning her that it might be rigged with traps. He then throws a rock to see if it's safe, but the chest turns into a Dark Souls mimic, which terrifies both of them. As they go deeper, Aqua uses a purifying spell to guide all the wandering souls into heaven, and Kazuma notices that something is different about her today because she is acting like an actual goddess. Just then, a group of undead attacks Kazuma, but Aqua uses her spells to defeat them. After she's done cleansing, Kazuma finds it weird how there are so many dangers in a low-level dungeon, so Aqua starts sniffing to be extra careful. That's when she finds a hidden door that opens up to a secret room. Inside is a scary-looking undead who introduces himself as Keel and reveals he's the one who built this dungeon. He takes them to a flashback of when he was rewarded with one wished by the king for his services to the kingdom. When he demanded the happiness of the princess who was married against her will for political reasons, the king got mad, so Keel took the princess and ran away. Even though the princess accepted his proposal, he was fighting the whole kingdom on his own, and he calls them his glory days. Eventually, they managed to get away, and now he sits here while her skeleton lies on the bed. Keel then asks them to purify him, so he can be with his beloved, and Aqua starts drawing a magic circle. Meanwhile, Kazuma realizes that Keel was gravely injured during his battle against the kingdom, and turned himself into a lich to protect the princess. Aqua finally prepares the circle and casts the spell, telling him that his sin is forgiven. She also tells him that he'll meet another goddess after this, and all he has to do is ask her to unite him with her beloved. With that, the spell takes effect and Keel disappears, hoping he can meet the princess once again. With his treasure left behind, Kazuma and Aqua leave the place when Kazuma makes an observation. He notes that since Aqua has a lot of holy power, she might be the reason all the undead were attracted to them. Even when Dullahan attacked, all of his minions targeted Aqua, which just proves his theory. Just then, they notice more monsters approaching because of Aqua, so Kazuma hides himself and lets her get run through like your mom at the bar. After a while, they finally make it outside, and Aqua argues that it's not her fault she was born holy, unlike him, who is a shut-in need. Despite their arguments, they return to the inn at night and enjoy a fine meal, courtesy of the loot they collected at the dungeon. Aqua is so happy that she starts doing party tricks for the other adventurers, and Kazuma secretly gives a drink to Luna because it wouldn't have been possible without her. When others see her giving free drinks to her, he decides to throw a party for everyone at the inn. The guys even ask him to do his panty-stealing trick, but just as he performs it, Chris walks in and gets her plot armor removed. As Megumin sits and watches, Union sneaks in and acts like she accidentally ran into her. Meanwhile, even though Kazuma is still on trial and in debt, he realizes that having fun once in a while is not so bad after all. The next day, Kazuma punishes Aqua by making her sew a new sweater for him because she threw his old one into the fire. She also spent all their money on booze last night, and now both of them are hungry. So Kazuma finds Aqua's secret fancy bubbly so he can sell it for money. Aqua begs him not to sell it because she cannot sleep without holding the bottle, so Aqua suggests they sell her jewels instead. Aqua argues the raiment shows her identity as a goddess, but Kazuma uses steel to snatch it from her neck. As they continue fighting, a strange blonde with some holy melons barges in and asks Kazuma for help. When Kazuma fails to recognize her, she gets embarrassed and starts acting weird, which makes them realize she's actually Darkness. Aqua immediately runs to her and complains that Kazuma was trying to strip her, but Megumin suggests they let her have a nice bath so her soul and body can recover from all that clapping. Darkness is confused at first, but when she finally realizes what's going on, she frantically explains that the Lord didn't have enough balls to lay hands on her. In reality, he wants Darkness to dress up like a lady and meet his handsome son so the two can get engaged. The reason she was away for so long is that she was resisting putting on the dress, but eventually she had to give in. Even though her father knows all Darp is a moron, he holds his son in high regard and is in favor of making Darkness marry him. She now needs Kazuma's help to convince his father. So Kazuma starts to wonder what he can really do in this situation. He realizes that even though Darkness is as useless as Sakura, thus, he tells her to just accept the marriage, which puts the whole squad at odds with him. Kazuma then suggests she accept the engagement at first, but then break it later, and Darkness agrees with this plan. Just then, Senna arrives with a couple of knights and demands Kazuma's help in eliminating some monsters in the area. Megumin tells her no because they're currently dealing with another crisis. But before things escalate, Kazuma runs his brain cells and tells her to help Sina, while he and Aqua help Darkness. She initially disagrees, but after Kazuma simps for her, she happily leaves with Sina. Soon after, Darkness and the squad meet with her father, and she calmly tells the old man that she is ready to attend the meeting for the arranged marriage. His father asks about Kazuma and Aqua, and she says they'll be acting as her temporary servants. Later, both of them get into their butler and maid outfits, respectively, and the whole family waits at the front door for the guests to arrive. Her father praises her for accepting this marriage, but Darkness says she just agreed to consider it. After putting some thought into it, she's decided that it's too soon to get married, so now she wants to have fun at the meeting. When she gets out of control, Kazuma, acting as her butler, subtly reminds her that she needs to act like a woman. Just as the guests arrive, Darkness decides to humiliate them, but Kazuma steps on her dress and makes her trip. Later, he reminds her that she was supposed to not besmirch her family name, but Darkness argues she wanted to have a bad rep so fewer people would want to marry her. She does not care if she is disinherited, because she can just take hard quests, get captured by the Devil King, and let him explore her chamber of secrets all he wants. She then says that the Lord's son is someone with an innocent face, and she wants someone as freaky as Kazuma for her husband. She starts describing her ideal man, basically a walking O with no spine, no gains, and enough reas to cheat on her with anything that breathes. Later, they meet up with the Lord's son Alexei, and before Darkness can ruin the meeting, Kazuma secretly uses a freeze spell on her ears to make her behave. Her father then suggests taking a walk in the park, and once outside, Alexei asks about her hobbies. Darkness is about to tell her she does goblin hunting, but Kazuma bumps her with his elbow, making Alexei realize they are very close. Darkness explains that Kazuma is his butler with benefits, and they not only eat together, but also bathe and sleep together. Imagining this makes her cookie moist, and she gets so worked up that she tears his dress and decides to show her true colors. She then challenges Alexei to a duel, but the man turns her down because she doesn't raise his sword against a woman. He then explains that he actually came here to turn down the marriage, but after seeing her jiggle physics, he's changed his mind. He loves how she treats her servant as her equal, unaware that Kazuma is actually their party leader. They head to the training room where Darkness exhausts herself, but not a single one of her attacks hits. She refuses to give up, so Alexei realizes her resolve is stronger than his and accepts defeat. Darkness still needs more, so Alexei asks Kazuma to take his place. This excites Darkness, as well because she has been looking forward to dueling Kazuma. As the fight begins, Kazuma uses water magic, which turns Darkness into a soaking mess, and both girls start accusing him of being a sussy backact. This frustrates Kazuma so much that he lets out his ice magic, and even Alexei begins to think that he's a monster. Being humiliated actually makes Darkness excited, so she throws her sword away and decides to have a hand-to-hand with Kazuma. Darkness knows she's got more strength than him, but when Kazuma uses Drain Touch, she decides to break his wrist before he sucks all the mana out of her. Kazuma then proposes that the winner make the loser grant one of their wishes, and Darkness agrees to the challenge. Kazuma then says that he'll make her do things that she doesn't like, and he won't stop even after she begs him to. Darkness sees it as more of a reward than a punishment, so she purposely loosens her grip and pretends that she's losing. She then assumes that Kazuma is secretly trying to swipe her V card, which excites her so much that she collapses. Just then, her father enters the room and sees Darkness looking like your mom after she's run through by the whole football team.
Those two, they did it.
Off with their heads.
Wait, no, it's not what you think!
The boys explain what really happened, so as Darkness rests, his father tells them about the time she made friends with a thief girl at the church. He also believes he's spoiled her a little, but Alexei believes she is a wonderful woman, and he would have married her if it wasn't for Kazuma. As Kazuma watches with a confused look, Alexei explains that Darkness is the happiest when she is around Kazuma. Darkness's father laughs at Alexei's statement and tells Kazuma to look after her daughter so she doesn't do anything dumb. Just then, Darkness wakes up, and seeing herself in new clothes, she wonders if Kazuma had his way with her. She then gets up and tells everyone that she cannot marry Alexei because she is carrying a mini Kazuma inside her. Alexei congratulates them and leaves, and Darkness's father is moved to tears at the thought of having a grandkid. Aqua starts panicking because she never thought Kazuma would go all the way, but Kazuma tries to explain that none of it is true. Just then, Sina and Megumin barge into the room looking for Kazuma. She explains that the monsters lurking around the area all came from the dungeon he raided the other day. So Kazuma turns to others and asks if they know anything about it. All three of them are in agreement that they did nothing to provoke the monsters, including Aqua, who says she took extra measures to reduce their numbers. Kazuma takes her to the side, and she explains that the magic circle she drew inside is still there, and it's so strong that no monster can approach it. What she doesn't realize is that if the monsters can't stay in the dungeon, they will naturally run out. That night, as they arrive at the dungeon gate, they reunite with Sina, who tells them to defeat the summoner and place a holy talisman on the summoning circle to stop it. Just then, one of those little monsters latches onto Aqua's leg like a toddler, which he finds cute until it kamikazes itself. Realizing the danger, Darkness decides to take the lead because she can easily tank those explosives. Before they enter, Megumin decides to stay outside because she'll only get in the way, and Aqua says the same. However, Kazuma forces her to tag along, which gives her PTs till the time Kazuma let her get clapped by dozens of undead monsters. As she covers in fear, Kazuma gives in and decides to go with Darkness all alone, making her realize she might have to deal with the explosive monster in his pants too. Inside, as Darkness takes on the little monsters, Kazuma is joined by some of Sena's men, and he wonders how he can remove Aqua's magic circle without having them notice. Just then, a large number of the monsters surround those men, and Darkness and Kazuma use this as a chance to run away. Eventually, they come across a strange man creating those explosive dolls, and Darkness recklessly confronts him. The man welcomes them into his dungeon, introducing himself as Vainer, a commander in the Devil King's army. Kazuma suggests they skedaddle, but Darkness refuses to fold in front of a demon and challenges him to a duel. Vainer takes no threat because he's rumored to be even stronger than the Devil King, and explains that he only came here to run some errands. When Kazuma says why he's sending dolls into the city, Vainer is shocked because he was only sending them to clear the dungeon. Realizing that the dungeon is already clear, he stops making the dolls and moves on to his next plan. He explains that his entire plan is to obtain a dungeon and set each of its rooms with traps so a skilled group of adventurers comes and clears it out. Once they make their way to the final room, he challenges them to a duel and promises all the riches of the world if they defeat him. Once the adventurers defeat him, they open the chest behind him, only to find a piece of paper that says you lose. This is how he wishes to die, and to make it a reality, he has decided to use this dungeon as his base of operations. The only thing stopping him is the magic circle in the next room, and Kazuma hints that one of his friends drew it. Using his appraising eye, Vainer recognizes Aqua and quickly locates her sitting outside and sipping tea. Getting all excited, he declares that he has a rule of never taking a human life and tells them to step aside so he can deal with the person who created the magic circle. When he threatens Aqua, Darkness pulls out her sword and decides to take him down, but Vainer keeps throwing insults at them, which Kazuma takes quite personally. As their battle begins, Darkness continues missing her attacks while Kazuma waits for the right opportunity to strike. When the moment arrives, he marches towards Vainer, only to slip and crash into him. This causes Vainer to go off balance, allowing Darkness to strike him by accident.
I did it.
He did it. He did it.
Vainer turns into sand with only his mask remaining, but before they can celebrate, the mask jumps into Darkness's face, which allows Vainer to control her body. However, instead of fearing it, Darkness starts to get excited, which freaks Vainer out. This starts an argument between Darkness and Vainer, and while the two go at it, Kazuma casually erases the magic circle using a cloth. When he's about to leave, Vainer threatens to take his life, but Kazuma casually attaches a sealing talisman to the mask so they can go outside and have Aqua purify darkness. As the two went outside, darkness continues to power through Vainer's control, and even though it causes her pain, that somehow makes it enjoyable for her. However, right before they reach the exit, darkness loses control of her body, and Vainer charges into a fight with Aqua. Just when he exits the dungeon, Aqua immediately uses a spell on darkness because she could sense evil approaching. After recovering for a few seconds, Vainer reveals his identity to the rest, and Cinna sends her men to capture him. Surrounded by multiple men who are ready to pound her, darkness starts getting excited, which confuses Vainer even more. Eventually, Vainer takes down all the men and proceeds towards Aqua, so Kazuma decides to step in. He starts insulting darkness for being an easy target, which frustrates her enough to regain control for a short time. Darkness feels invincible when she's merged with Vainer, so he starts tempting her to let them coexist. However, Kazuma tells her that if she lets him take off the seal, he will give her back shots on the kitchen counter, which is enough to change her mind. Kazuma then uses a fire spell to burn the talisman, but Darkness is unable to remove the mask from her face. Since Darkness resists holy magic due to being a crusader, the only way for them to be saved is if Megumin nukes Darkness while Vainer is still inside her. Megumin worries that she's become too strong and Darkness won't survive the explosion, so Darkness gives Vainer an option: either leave her body and be purified or die with her in a bang. Vanir, who is already looking for a cool way to die, picks the second option. With the decision made, Megumin finally unleashes her explosion on Darkness, thus ending the conflict. Darkness, despite being gravely injured, somehow survived the blast, but her precious armor was destroyed in the process. A few days later, they all gather at the guild where Cinna hands Kazuma a letter of apology, releasing him of all suspicions. On the other hand, Darkness is given a royal thanks and a new set of armor as a reward for putting her life on the line for the kingdom. And lastly, for the contributions Kazuma and his party made for the kingdom, all of their debt is subtracted from their award, still leaving them with 40 million Eris. With the squad finally making progress, Kazuma takes a step outside and thanks the plot gods for the favor. A few days later, Darkness and Megumin urge Aqua to go on adventures with them, but she just wants to laze around in front of the campfire. When they start arguing, Aqua points at Kazuma, who's resting under the kotatsu, and tells the girls to tend to him first. Turns out, a few days ago, Kazuma and Darkness went to Wiz's shop to let her know that her fellow comrade Vainer was slain in battle. Since Darkness shared her body with him, she thinks it's best that she speaks because she knows what Vainer was like. However, as she steps into the shop, she is greeted by Vainer himself, and he welcomes her inside. Wiz congratulates Kazuma for being a free man again, but Kazuma questions how Vainer is still alive after the explosion. Vainer then explains that he did actually die in that explosion, but he has multiple lives and he's now on his second. Later, Wiz explains that Vainer already wanted to leave his post as the commander, so he no longer holds up the barrier protecting the Devil King. Since he's now harmless, he proposes a business idea to Kazuma, telling him to create things from his world and sell them in this one. Kazuma's first idea was to create a kotatsu, and now he's so homesick that he doesn't even want to come out. When they try to pull him out, he attacks them and leaves them both exhausted. However, when he feels the need to hit the bathroom, he calls for a temporary truce and asks the girls to carry him to the bathroom. The girls agree to lift him up, but instead of taking him to the bathroom, they yeet him out of the window. Later, the squad heads to the armory, where Kazuma finally gets his new katana and a set of fancy armor that he had ordered earlier. Once he puts the armor on, the girls ask him to make a pose, but the armor is too heavy for Kazuma to move. In the end, he decides to stick with his sword and aura farms by striking a cool pose, but all his social credits go down in the dump when he bumps into several display weapons and knocks them down. Continuing his Rizzler routine, he decides to walk out, only for his sword to get stuck in the door. Later, as Megumin and Kazuma have lunch, she notices that he's cut his sword in half, and he's not too happy about it. Meanwhile, Darkness and Aqua find some great quests on the board. Luna asks them to be careful because it's a dangerous quest, but Kazuma puts his finger on her lips, declaring that he and his sword can handle anything. He's still figuring out what to name the sword, so when Megumin engraves the name Chunchanmaru, Kazuma gets depressed. Later, as they gather for the quest, Kazuma explains that he will snipe the king and the queen first, which will cause the others to disperse. Even if his first shot misses, Darkness will hold them down, giving him another chance at sniping. If Darkness fails to hold them back, Megumin will blow them all up, and Aqua will provide support from the back. Once the horde arrives, Kazuma is able to locate the queen, but the king is indistinguishable from everyone else. To solve this problem, Aqua fires a spell that attracts all the lizards towards her, thus ruining the entire plan even before it starts. After a brief argument, Kazuma manages to somehow snipe the king, but Aqua explains that it will get them more excited because now they have a chance to get laid with the queen. As the horde approaches, Megumin decides to blow them all up, but she fails to activate her magic because Kazuma used Drain Touch on her earlier. That leaves Darkness all by herself, but she gets run through immediately. Despite the chaos, Kazuma stays calm and looks for the queen, and once he spots it, he takes a shot, taking it down midair. However, the queen falls on top of the tree, which causes him to take a nasty fall and break his neck. He finds himself in front of the goddess Eris again, and she tells him that the others managed just fine after he died. He also advises him to be more careful with his life, as bringing him back again and again is not possible. Kazuma then asks if he can stay here for a while, and Eris lets him do so. That's when he realizes that even when he's surrounded by shawties all the time, they're too freaky to make his pickle tickle. Eris, on the other hand, is exactly the type of girl he likes, so he asks if she stays here alone all the time. Eris tells him she sneaks out to the surface every now and then and tells him to keep it a secret. When he hears Aqua calling him to the real world, he tells her to hold on for a bit because he has to chat with Eris. However, Aqua starts pushing him to come back because they still have to defeat the Devil King. Kazuma realizes he might die 100 more times before he can get there, so he tells Aqua that he wants to be born in another world. He turns to Eris and asks her to send him into a world where he has 2 hot stepsisters. But when he hears Megumin stripping him in the real world, he panics and asks Eris to send him back. When he opens his eyes, he finds Megumin sitting on his chest with tears in her eyes. She says she did what she did because he didn't want to come back. Kazuma looks around to ask the others what she did, but Darkness is too embarrassed and Aqua is too pure to tell him what actually happened. That night, while Kazuma hits the shower, he finally realizes what happened and runs to the girls to ask where Megumin is. Turns out, she left to stay with Union for a few days and Kazuma is mad because she wrote the Holy Sword Excalibur on his baby Johnson. A few days later, Megumin returns to the mansion to find Kazuma acting like a Riz Lord and having Aqua serve him like she's his servant. In panic, she apologizes for what she did the other day and asks him to go back to normal, but he calmly says that such matters don't concern the rich. He then invites her to join him, but Megumin keeps apologizing, confused as to why he's acting so weird. Just then, Aqua arrives with a poorly made tea and Kazuma calmly tells her to remake it while Megumin watches in horror. Just then, Darkness pulls Megumin to the side and explains that after Kazuma saw the doodles on his Wii, he vowed to make her beg for forgiveness. Just then, he heard a knock on the door and rushed to open it, thinking it was Megumin, but it was actually Vanner who came here with another business proposition. Aqua asked him how he went past her barrier, and Vanner started making fun of how easy it was, which pissed her off. To get back at him, she started poking his both and made fun of the fact that he was basically a corroding with every touch. Kazuma stepped in to make sure things didn't escalate, but the two of them continued to throw shade at each other. Vanner made fun of Aqua for being a goddess and how her followers often say that God is always watching. He then told a story of a boy who was peeping in the women's bath and got arrested, and joked that maybe the guards who were watching over the toilets were the real gods all along. This hit Aqua right on the mark, and she immediately used a purification spell on Vanner. The spell turned his body into sand, but even then, Aqua could not get hold of the mask. After their mock battle, Vanner inspected the products that Kazuma had designed based on his knowledge of his previous world. At first, he wanted to split the profits 50-50, but after seeing the potential, he asked Kazuma to sell the designs to him for 300 million eras. If he kept the designs and shared the profits, Vanner promised 1 million eras a month, but Kazuma did not think the products would sell that much. However, it would still benefit them because they wouldn't spend the whole thing in one night. Since the decision was critical, Vanner gave them a few days' time to consider their option, and because of that, Kazuma is acting like royalty. Megumin suggests they take another quest, but Kazuma turns her down, saying he never has to work another day in his life. He decides to just become a businessman from now on. So when Aqua reminds him that she's stuck here until they defeat the Devil King, he suggests hiring strong adventurers to do the task. Aqua loves the idea, and the two begin daydreaming of living as millionaires. However, Megumin gets frustrated when she sees them acting this way and goes on a rant, warning them about the real strength of the Devil King. As her words fall onto deaf ears, he turns to Darkness to be the voice of reason, but she's gooning to the thought of Kazuma becoming a pathetic loser because that's what she's into. Kazuma asks Megumin to chill out because he still hasn't recovered from his broken neck. So Megumin suggests they go to a hot spring. Aqua quickly chimes in, telling them about Reincarnated, the city of hot springs. Kazuma agrees to the mini-adventure, and the squad packs up immediately. Before leaving, Kazuma visits Wiz's shop and tells Vainer that he hasn't made a decision yet, so he'll have to wait until they return from the trip. Just then, he notices Wiz lying on the floor all bruised up, and Vainer explains he electrocuted her because she was loading portable toilets into the shop. They appear good on paper, but they attract monsters and even cause a flood at times, and Wiz has a habit of loading useless junk into the shop. Since Vainer wants to get rid of these items, he asks Kazuma to babysit Wiz for a while. Kazuma then carries her to the rest of the squad, and when they notice she's starting to fade away, he uses Drain Touch on Darkness to heal her. Afterward, Kazuma buys tickets for a wagon, but one of the seats is already taken by a baby red dragon, which means one of them will have to ride in the back. Wiz decides to take the hit, but Aqua suggests they play rock, paper, scissors for it. Kazuma challenges him to a best of 3 and ends up beating her, so he begs her to play one more round. After he accepts, she uses holy magic to boost her luck, but loses even then, prompting Kazuma to reveal he has never lost this game even once. Aqua starts throwing a rant and accuses him of cheating, and after a whole session of constant bickering, they finally get seated. As they go around town, Chris watches them from the roof, and the ruffian guy gives Kazuma a thumbs up at the gate. Eventually, they leave the town and enter the hills, soon passing through a bridge that arches over a beautiful river. Meanwhile, Megumin grows a liking to the baby dragon, but she keeps her distance because she doesn't want to betray her pet cat. A couple of hours later, the squad passes through a desert, and Kazuma uses his foresight to see a large cloud of dust heading in their direction. Kazuma asks the driver about it, and he says it's just a pack of running hawk kites, and they mean no harm. He further explains that these creatures are attracted to an incredibly hard mineral called adamantite, and Kazuma immediately turns to Darkness because her armor is made from that mineral. Since it's their fault, Kazuma asks the squad to help clear out the monsters, but the driver tells them to stay put because they already have guards. Ignoring his pleas, Kazuma and his squad march down the road, and Darkness attracts all the monsters to herself, immediately becoming a brave warrior in the guard's eyes. Impressed by her guts, one of the guards uses a binding skill to help Darkness, but she purposely gets in the way because being tied up excites her. The guard believes Darkness took the hit to save him and starts begging for forgiveness. As the Hawkkites approach, Darkness prepares to get rammed from all directions, but the monsters jump over her and continue their march. To protect the wagons, Kazuma advises them to hide in a cave and runs to carry Darkness. However, she is too heavy because of those fat cakes in her armor. Since they don't have much time, Darkness asks Kazuma to tie her up with the wagon and drag her through the sand. Kazuma does as asked, and once the wagon starts dragging her, she starts making happy noises. The girls turn to Kazuma with judgmental eyes, and Kazuma swears that it was not his idea. As the Hawkkites close, Wiz quickly reacts and casts Bottomless Swamp, spreading a thick, sticky pit beneath them to slow their flight. At the same time, the wagon keeps rolling forward, but Aqua keeps tossing healing spells without a second thought, casually healing every broken bone as Darkness enjoys the humiliation. As they get closer to the cave, Kazuma asks Aqua to buff his magic, and once powered up, he climbs to the top of the wagon and starts shooting magic arrows at the Hawkkites. Instead of scaring them off though, it only makes them angrier, and they start swarming faster. Finally, they reach the cave. Kazuma gets an idea and yeets Darkness straight into the entrance. The Hawkkites chase after her without hesitation, and right as they run inside, Megumin steps up and fires her signature explosion spell. The blast destroys all the birds in one massive boom, and the day is saved. That night, the team is rewarded with a feast for their heroic work, and while everyone else is happily stuffing their faces, Kazuma just feels guilty since he knows the whole mess started because of them. When the old man in charge offers them money, Kazuma awkwardly refuses, and the old man tears up, calling him a noble soul. As Aqua shows off with party tricks to entertain the crowd, Kazuma sits by the fire fixing Darkness's damaged armor while she and Megumin sit beside him, admiring his skill. When they compliment him, he casually says it's thanks to the blacksmithing skill he picked up a while ago, brushing off the praise. Later that night, as the squad dozes under the stars, Kazuma wakes up with a weird feeling in his gut. A moment later, the others start waking up too, and he uses his foresight skill to scan the area, revealing a swarm of undead monsters heading their way. As panic spreads through the camp, Kazuma runs off to help the others prepare, but he hears Aqua screaming and immediately rushes back. Annoyed and scared, Aqua throws a massive purification spell in all directions, vaporizing the entire horde of undead in one burst. She starts dancing around in her glowing magic circle, soaking in everyone's cheers. Kazuma, however, just sighs, knowing she's the one who attracted them in the first place with her holy aura. The next morning, Union shows up at Kazuma's mansion hoping to challenge Megumin, but feels crushed when she finds the house completely empty. Meanwhile, the team finally arrives at Reincarnated, the city of water and hot springs. Kazuma's eyes light up when he sees dwarves and elves walking around for the first time, and Megumin proudly explains that this town is famous among adventurers as a place to relax and recover. Darkness adds that she's traveled to many places, but nothing matches the beauty of Reincarnated's scenery. When the wagon drops them off, Megumin gets sad because she was starting to get attached to the baby dragon. Soon after, Aqua reveals that this is the city where the Axis Church is based, and proudly says she's personally blessed the place. Kazuma finally puts the pieces together and realizes this is why she dragged them here in the first place. Just then, a crowd of shopkeepers starts swarming them, each trying to get them to enter the Axis Church. A few girls even notice that Aqua looks suspiciously like the goddess they all worship, so Kazuma quickly drags the group away before anyone asks too many questions. Later on, Wiz wakes up in an inn after having a weird dream of Verdia waving at her from across the sea. She finds Kazuma and Darkness sitting nearby and thanks them for saving her. But Kazuma points at Darkness, saying she did all the work. As they wonder what Aqua might be up to, Wiz assures them she's fine and tells them to go enjoy the city. Darkness then leads Kazuma to a fountain in the center of town, where they both stare at a statue of a gorgeous goddess. Just then, a girl trips and drops her apples, and when Kazuma helps her, she offers to let him taste her forbidden fruit as a reward. The girl gently grabs his hand and invites him to a cave run by the Axel Church, but Kazuma gets weirded out and decides to leave. However, the girl refuses to let him go and starts spewing some nonsense about some misfortune that he'll face if he doesn't convert to the Axis faith. Darkness pulls out her necklace and reveals she's a follower of Eris, which disgusts her so much that she leaves while spitting all over the place. As the duo continues ahead, they run into another girl who is running away from an average One Piece fanboy. Turns out, they're just playing an act to invite people to join the Axis Church, so Darkness and Kazuma skedaddle out of there with their heads low. The actors continue to follow them, that is, until Darkness pulls out her Eris necklace, prompting them to leave immediately. Next up, they run into a weird old man who congratulates them for being the millionth person to pass down this street. To reward them, he gives them a free enrollment paper for the Axis Church, which just annoys them at this point. Afterward, they run into a girl pretending to be Kazuma's classmate and urging him to join the Axis Church. In the end, they decide to take a stop at an inn, where Kazuma is offered milk for being an Axis follower, while Darkness is given a dog bone for following Eris, which makes her excited. As they leave the inn, they run into a young girl who trips and hurts her knee. Kazuma immediately tends to her, and she thanks him with a gentle smile, making him realize this town isn't so bad after all. The girl then asks for his name and tells him to write it on paper so she remembers it. When Kazuma agrees, she hands him an enrollment paper for the Axel Church, and this is the moment when he finally loses his mind. Raging with fury, Kazuma enters the church and demands to meet the person in charge before he commits war crimes on them. A nun calmly reveals that Zesta Sama is out spreading the word of God, so Kazuma asks if she ran into a mage. The nun points to Megumin cowering in the corner, shaking as if the priest touched a little more than her soul. She also points out that the blonde he came here with is being stoned by the children for being a follower of Eris. Kazuma quickly leaves to rescue her, but Darkness enjoys getting on her knees and being stoned to death. Afterward, he enters the confession booth to talk to Aqua, but she refuses to break character and continues acting like a priest. Kazuma gets increasingly frustrated and goes on a rant about how her followers have been hounding him to join the Axis Church, but Aqua ignores his cries and gently tells him to exit. Finally, Kazuma decides to play along and tells Aqua that he actually has a confession to make, which piques her interest. When she asks him to speak his heart, Kazuma says a priest friend of hers uses a special cup to do party tricks, and he accidentally broke it. He also mentions that she keeps bragging about a rare fancy liquor, so he poured a little to see how good it actually is. He says the liquor was so good that he drank it all and replaced it with cheap booze so she won't notice. Finally, Aqua gives in and starts fighting Kazuma, who later explains that he was just joking. While they're in the same booth, an old man enters the other side and starts confessing. He says that he's been a member of the Axis Church his whole life, but Eris's juicy melons are making his wee-wee tickle. and he wants Aqua's blessings to resist the temptation. Aqua gently tells him that a man should love plots of all shapes and sizes, and since it's natural to be tempted by bigger plots, all his sins are forgiven. She also lets him in on the little secret that goddess Eris uses pads to make herself look bigger, and tells him to spread the word so others don't fall for her act. When Kazuma looks at her with judgmental eyes, she explains that the number of followers and the strength of their faith have a huge impact on her powers. Even though her followers are fewer, their faith is really strong, and she'll do anything for her disciples, including trash-talking Eris. That evening, the squad returns to their hotel, and Kazuma checks on Wiz, who says she feels much better after taking a bath. Annoyed with the fact that he missed seeing her chug jugs, he tells the girls he's going to the mixed bath and hopes that they will join him. However, the girls just ignore his secret pleas, and Kazuma enters the bath all alone, devoid and frustrated. Just then, a busty redhead notices him staring at her and asks him to stop. But when he refuses to, she packs up her assets and leaves immediately. Afterward, Kazuma notices another man getting frustrated over the townsfolk, forcing him to convert, and realizes he isn't the only one. Soon after, he hears Darkness and Megumin getting into the woman's bath and starts eavesdropping on their conversation. As the girls start gossiping, Megumin suddenly realizes that Kazuma might be able to hear them from the other side. They call out his name to ask if he's there, but Kazuma stays silent, giving them the impression that they're all alone. With that, the girls start praising him for always being so reliable and helpful, and Kazuma starts to get embarrassed. He decides to leave them alone, but as soon as Darkness mentions something about Megumin's pancakes, he starts to listen again. He then hears the girls getting a little too friendly, and when he tries to peek, Darkness spots him and punches him through the wall. In retaliation, Kazuma throws cold water on them, and they start throwing buckets at him. That night, Kazuma returns to the hotel and finds Aqua crying in Wiz's lap, revealing that she got kicked out by the very church that worships her. Turns out, she turned the spring water into regular hot water, and Kazuma recalls she did the same with tea. The next day, Aqua tells the group that the Devil King's army is diluting the hot spring to weaken her church. But no one takes her seriously. She demands that they help her protect her disciples, but both Kazuma and Megumin refuse. Later, the two of them relax under a tree when an old hag shows up and starts urging them to join the Axis Church again. The two immediately leave the area, but no matter where they go, more of Aqua's annoying followers keep surrounding them. Later, as they relax by the docks, they notice the frustrated man from earlier, ranting about the Axis followers hounding him too. Just then, Wiz shows up and tells Kazuma about her dream in which she saw her old party members waving at her. As they get to talking, they hear Aqua's voice and rush to see her uniting her people in the war against the Devil King. She reveals that there is some kind of poison in the hot springs, but when people say they haven't noticed anything wrong, she says it's because she's been purifying them. She then advises the others to refrain from using the hot springs until the issue is resolved. But one of her followers tells her that it would make them broke. As she continues her speech, an angry man shows up and accuses her of turning the hot springs into simple hot water. This turns the whole crowd against her, and while Kazuma and Megumin watch in silence, Wiz begs them to do something before it escalates. Aqua then turns to Darkness for help, but when she doesn't say anything, Aqua tells them that she is the actual goddess they worship as a last resort. However, the people call bees and demand that she get tied up and thrown into the lake.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
That night, Aqua returns to the hotel and cries her eyes out because her followers refuse to believe that she's a true goddess. The squad advises her to just let it go. But Aqua doesn't want her followers to get sick in the hot springs. Just then, they hear noise outside, and Kazuma pulls away the curtain to see the whole town protesting against Aqua, calling her a witch from the Devil King's army. Before they can get their hands on Aqua, the squad decides to skedaddle from the hotel. Hiding in an alley, Aqua tells the others that she can fix the problem with the hot springs if she purifies the water source. Just then, a few rioters locate the squad, so they have to run immediately. They head to the gate guarding the water source, and Aqua shows them her adventurer card so they can let her in. However, the men at the gate reveal they have orders from the overseer not to let anyone through. As a last resort, Aqua tries to use her Axis influence to get through, but the guards reveal they are from the Eris Church, so it won't work on them. She even tries to flirt with them, but when that fails too, she threatens to tell the Axis followers that they were saying bad things about their goddess Aqua. Despite being scared at first, they recognize Aqua as the supposed prankster who purified all the hot springs and refuses to let them in. That's when Kazuma asks Darkness to use her association with the Eris sect to get them through. While she hesitates, Megumin steps up and introduces her as the princess of the Dustiness family, and they all try to restrain her so they can show her heiress pendant to the guards. Darkness continues to resist, so the squad turns to Wiz and asks her to help reveal the pendant that she is hiding. Darkness tells them that her family taught her not to use it to assert authority, but nonetheless, they pull it out and show it to the guards. After they head inside, Darkness rants about them using her royal status, but Kazuma gently tells him that he still sees her as a friend. This makes Darkness blush, and she immediately forgives the squad, prompting them to call her a pushover. Arriving at the hot spring, they find a dark liquid inside and Aqua's hunch that it is being poisoned following the pipes. They eventually locate the original water source and find the angry man from earlier standing there. It appears as if he is going to jump into the poison because he's done with life, but in reality, he's just dipping his hands in there for some reason. As he starts selling the hot springs, Wiz remembers seeing him before and recognizes him as Hans. The man pretends not to know her, so Wiz reveals that Hans is actually a poison slime mutant and asks if he is the one poisoning the water source. Wiz continues to pester her to remember who she is, but Hans gets fed up and decides to leave. However, the Kazuma squad stands in his way, so he finally admits to being a poison slime mutant and disses Wiz for running a terrible shop. He then reminds Wiz that she had made a deal to never bother the demons again in a non-intervention treaty, but Wiz claims that she only wanted to say hi and has no intention to stop him. Despite that, Hans challenges her to a duel, calling her weak for letting others fight for her. Seeing Wiz panic, Kazuma steps up like a simp and promises to fight for her, hoping she'd let him tap later. Wiz begs him to settle this peacefully, but he shushes her and tells Hans to prepare for battle. Hans finally gets in the mood, saying no one has even lived after learning about his real identity. But Kazuma is certain a slime stands no chance in front of Aqua. That's when Wiz reveals that Hans is actually one of the leaders in the Devil King's army, and Darkness adds that slimes are one of the toughest opponents to beat. They are immune to physical attacks, and they can either melt you to death or smother you. Megumin reveals that with Hans's poison, he can simply game-end anyone he touches, and Kazuma finally realizes he bit more than he can chew. Aqua tells him not to worry because she can revive him if he dies, but Kazuma's heart starts pounding harder than Darkness when she hears the word punishment. Then, immediately, Kazuma runs away, and both Megumin and Aqua run after him. Soon after, Darkness and Wiz join him too, and when Aqua asks why he's running away, he says none of them have the power to fight Hans. As they reach the exit, they notice the whole anti-Aqua mob standing on the other side, so Kazuma suggests giving up on the hot springs. Aqua begs him not to do so because all of Axis Church would be ruined, but he and Megumin actually want it to get ruined. Aqua finally loses it and leaves to fight Hans alone, so Kazuma, having a change of heart, decides to help her. Once they return to the water source, Hans reveals his plan of destroying the town and leaving it for good. Kazuma then asks what he did to the real overseer, only to learn that Hans ate him for real. Suddenly, Wiz starts aura farming, revealing that her condition of non-interference was that no civilians were hurt. However, Hans has broken that rule, so now she's gonna hit him harder than Levi hit Aaron during that court meeting, freezing him inside an ice wall. Wiz slowly approaches Hans and gives a speech about how adventurers and knights take risks in their job. Thus, death is a common occurrence in their jobs. However, a nice old man who oversaw the hot springs had not done anything wrong, and Hans will now pay for taking his life. Hans finally realizes that Wiz is not gonna let this slide, so he chops his own arm off to release himself from the ice wall. He reveals his true form to the squad, which turns out to be a giant and horrific slime monster. Hans then starts spitting poison in all four directions, contaminating the water source even further. Seeing this, Aqua makes a run through the acid rain and dips her hands in the water. She continuously purifies the water so her disciples don't die of poisoning, but her hands start to burn in the process. The mob that was after her sees the giant monster from a distance, finally realizing that she was right all along. The whole town rushes in and starts attacking Hans, while the church priests come together to cast healing spells on Aqua, so it hurts less. Megumin decides to blow the slime into bits, but Aqua begs her not to damage the mountain. Kazuma turns to Wiz to ask if she can help, but she says she can't freeze Hans in his current size. Just then, they spot the Overseer's skeleton inside of Hans's body, and Kazuma asks Aqua if she can revive someone if their body hasn't been fully digested. After she confirms it, he tells Megumin to blow him up and asks Darkness to protect the others. With that, he takes his role as the leader and lures Hans away from the water source. He then jumps into the pit and lets Hans melt his body. This allows Megumin to blow Hans up, and once he is reduced to a skeleton, Wiz immediately jumps in and freezes him in an ice crystal. She then uses the remainder of her magic to break the crystal, thus eliminating Hans for good. However, once she collapses, Hans appears once again, now in a tiny slime form, and vows to devour all of them. Just then, he sees Aqua approaching him like a final boss. Encouraged by her disciples chanting her name in the background, Aqua then powers up a fiery attack and lands it right on Hans's face, which only gets stronger after Aqua's disciples show their faith in her. Once the spirit bomb is big enough, Aqua uses the attack God Requiem and blows Hans to smithereens. The next day, despite everything Aqua did, she got no gratitude from the townfolks because thanks to her God Requiem, all of the hot springs in the area turned into regular hot water baths. The Devil King's plan to cut off the city's income worked, and the squad had to take a wagon home because Wiz was too weak to teleport them. After the long trip, the squad finally returned to the city of Axel, and after dropping off Wiz at the shop, they went to their mansion, where they were greeted by Union, who had been waiting patiently for them to return. To reward her patience, Megumin agrees to duel her while the others head inside. The squad is happy to return home, and Kazuma awaits the spring, hoping that it will bring new exciting adventures to his life. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you made it to the end, comment, "I love feet" as proof.